Ryun, the youngest son of the prestigious Sermon family of the Drea continent, a kid who should have been living a peaceful, privileged life until his entire family destroyed after his father and brothers mysteriously disappear. And just when things couldn't get worse, the Feton family swoops in, kidnaps him, and ends his life with torture straight out of a nightmare. Lovely people, truly. But death wasn't the end. When Ryun opens his eyes again, he's in Adion, an endless battlefield where gods treat human lives like toys. In this slaughterhouse of a world, Ryun rises from nothing to become the Ghost King, mastering the arts of assassins, necromancers, and specters, challenging the gods themselves. Of course, he dies again, but this time, the god's little game doesn't stick. He awakens once more, back in his 12-year-old body, still carrying every skill, every memory, and every ounce of power he earned in Adion. Now, with time rewound and his strength intact, he sets out to rewrite fate, protect the Sermon family, and turn reality into his personal game board. And first on his list, a bloody, calculated revenge on House Feton, the same family that ruined everything and killed him the first time. And since we've clearly come a little too far into his glory days, let's rewind to the part where he was, quite literally, being tortured to death. His body had been carved open again and again, the wounds still steaming. Nearby, discarded tools glowed faintly over a bowl of burning flesh. Across from him, the white-haired man watched with a relaxed amusement, speaking as if commenting on a performance. He lifted the boy by the head, studying him. The boy's bloodshot eyes glared back in defiance even as his body shook. The man's smile widened, finding the contrast entertaining. The torment continued until the boy's scream tore through the chamber. Blood sprayed across the wall while the man observed without slowing, irritated only by how long the boy clung to life. The boy tried to beg, but the words broke apart in his ruined mouth. The man leaned closer, intrigued only by the boy's stubbornness. The boy forced out a plea for death. The man pretended not to understand, teasing him for losing his tongue. He mused about extracting value from someone born of Sermon blood, though even that novelty was beginning to fade. Still, he ordered the boy not to die, claiming House Feton still required him. A moment later, he corrected himself with a twisted satisfaction, declaring he was simply celebrating the 3rd year since wiping out House Sermon. The boy collapsed forward, chains rattling as he endured the weight of his own blood. Moonlight filtered through a narrow window above. Below it, the boy hung limp in his restraints, surrounded by dried pools of blood and the tools that had carved him apart. The boy realized that 3 years had slipped by in this darkness. The name of his fallen house burned quietly in his thoughts. House Sermon had once ridden at the front of Drea's armies, their banner cutting through battlefields as they fought back the monsters spilling endlessly from the dark zone. Among the 5 great houses, Sermon had stood at the top, known for unmatched strength and prestige, but after his father and elder brothers disappeared without warning, the family crumbled faster than anyone expected. House Feton seized the moment, striking with precision to finish what weakness had begun. Their aim had always been the same, to wipe out Sermon and claim the gift carried by its bloodline, the blessing that had once allowed the clan to stand unshaken, the power born from the blood of the dragon. Those who inherited that blood became archmages at 10 and sword masters by 15, but he had never been counted among them. Instead, he carried the mark of the one anomaly that surfaced once every few centuries, a curse woven into their lineage, awakening only in a single child tied to Demon King Arcan, and he had been the one fated to inherit it. Because of that mark, neither sword nor magic ever answered him. In the quiet corners of his childhood, he had wished he had been born without it, wished for strength that never came. Blood dripped from his body as he hung in the cell, and the truth weighed on him. Without the curse, House Feton would never have crushed them. Without it, his clan would not have fallen. Sons Feton smiled through crimson light, twisting the blade in his hand as he prepared another test. The boy knew that without the curse holding him back, he would never have suffered the man's endless experiments. But the thought faded. He no longer had the strength to resent anything. His body sagged against the chains, breaths shallow and fading. A quiet certainty settled over him. His life was ending here. For the first time in years, he felt the promise of rest. His vision blurred, the world dimming around him as consciousness slipped. But when he opens his eyes, he is no longer in reality. He finds himself in Adion, an endless battlefield and the playground of the gods. In this place where countless players lose their lives, Ryun grows into the Ghost King, a master player who has mastered every class of assassin, necromancer, and specter, and challenges the gods. In the battlefield, purple lightning crackled across a monstrous form, its eye burning through the void. More shapes followed, towering behind the first, beasts and phantoms born from the curse lodged within his soul. their presence pressed against the realm, gathering around the dying boy who had carried their seal since birth, the darkness in his eyes stirring like an old curse waking again. Bodies clashed in a storm of steel and rage. Screams blurred into one another. His past self moved like a ghost swallowed by firelight, swinging desperately as warriors fell around him, swallowed by a tide of blood and dust. Above that burning memory, a radiant figure shone like a false angel, golden hair cascading like molten sunlight. The man looked down with amusement, the kind that twisted into cruelty, as if savoring the collapse of an entire life with one quiet breath. Boy surged again, refusing to kneel even as darkness gnawed at his edges. His enemy answered with calm arrogance, fingers glowing with divine venom. Power flared, light snapped, the world collapsed into a single blinding strike. A golden inferno bloomed, swallowing sky and ground alike. When the dust settled, the so-called angel rose untouched, radiant and monstrous at once. Flames curled around him as if worshipping. He stretched out his hand, voice echoing through the void like a decree carved into fate. He offered a wish, not mercy, but a bargain dripping in hatred. And then everything cracked. A hand reached through the blinding gold. Light swallowed his vision, and the world flipped like a page being ripped away. A voice called him back, frantic, young, impossibly familiar. The darkness peeled away, replaced by soft lamplight and a girl's desperate cries. "Young master," she kept calling, shaking him as if trying to drag him out of death itself. He forced his eyes open. The maid's face hovered above him, wide eyes, trembling glasses, panic spilling from every breath. Something struck him harder than any blade. She looked younger, far younger than she should be. She scolded him, flustered, insisting he'd make himself sick. Her voice wavered between worry and exasperation, tugging him back into a life he thought he had already lost. The boy stared at her, heart pounding with something colder than confusion. She wasn't supposed to look like this. Not anymore. This was the Serwin estate, the mansion from before everything fell apart, and his nanny whose name is Colin, the one who should have been older, worn by years of hardship, stood before him untouched by time, trembling with concern. No way, the thought hammered inside him, rising into panic. He demanded a mirror. She rushed to fetch one, stumbling over her own breath, too startled to even question his urgency. As he steadied himself, he caught his reflection in the mirror. A much younger face stared back. His age, his frame, everything was as it had been years ago. He demanded the date. Colin answered nervously, the 7th of August, year 1892 of the Drea calendar. A chill settled in him. That was when he had been 12, the same year the tragedy had begun. Memories of flames flickered in his eyes. He remembered the moment House Servan first fell to Feton. The golden figure from before reappeared in his mind, repeating the same promise. He would grant the boy's wish. The boy tightened his grip on the mirror, trying to steady his thoughts. He stared at his reflection, realizing he had truly returned to this point in time. Footsteps approached. Colin stepped aside as an older man entered, the same man he remembered from years later. The boy recognized him with a hard stare. Alejandro, captain of the Servan Knights. Alejandro noted his pallor and allowed him to rest rather than train. The boy watched him carefully, masking the turmoil beneath his calm expression. Colin hurried to fuss over him again, but before she could continue, he cut her off with a quiet refusal. Colin froze, startled by the sudden firmness in his voice. Alejandro studied the boy's expression, but the boy only straightened his posture and insisted he was fine. Colin looked between them, unsure, while he shifted off the bed and asked what the day's training would be. Alejandro hesitated at the sudden interest. The boy's refusal to rest startled him more than any illness. When he finally answered that it would be longsword footwork drills, the boy rose with unexpected calm. His tone held an unusual certainty, enough for Alejandro to question whether he was truly the same young master he had raised. The boy gave a steady affirmation, naming himself as a member of House Servan without the slightest doubt. The words triggered a memory of the golden figure whispering about granting a wish, and the boy wondered if this strange return to the past had been tied to that promise. But whatever the cause, he no longer cared. His chance was here. He decided to skip the drills entirely. The curse within him stirred, and the shadow of his older self seemed to stand behind him, urging him forward. This time he would go straight to monster hunting. This was the opening he had never been given before, his chance to overturn everything. Resolve sharpened in his eyes. He would not waste this. Outside, sunlight washed over the estate grounds as a golden status window formed before him. It displayed his meager stats, all at their lowest. The curse of Arcan still clung to him, sealing magic and attracting beasts, just as it had in his former life. Even so, the system responded. The window appeared because he carried a power no one else on the continent possessed. He tested it with focus, confirming that even in this reverted body the ability remained intact. Alejandro entered again, informing him that the monster had been brought out. The boy dismissed the status window and followed. They stepped into the enclosed training grounds, where a chained goblin shrieked and thrashed. Its eyes burned with feral hunger the moment it sensed him. The goblin lunged with anger and hunger, tearing across the arena toward the heir of the sermon house. Ryun's sermon. Dust kicked up around its feet as it closed the distance. But Ryun stood firm, wooden sword raised. Alejandro and Colin watched from the edge of the grounds. Colin's face tightened in alarm, urging Alejandro to stop the test immediately. She reminded him that the boy had always collapsed even from a brief encounter with a goblin. Alejandro stayed silent, conflicted, eyes fixed on the boy's stance. Ryun knew she wasn't wrong. Until yesterday, the sight of a monster would have frozen him completely. But this time, he grounded his breathing. He had lived through far worse. A single goblin no longer felt like an impossible threat. The curse stirred. A warning flashed before him as the system reacted, Arcan's influence awakening inside his body. The fear that haunted him since childhood rushed up violently, amplified beyond its natural force, twisting pressure around his chest. For a moment, the familiar terror tried to drag him back into the helplessness of his former life. Pain spiked behind his eyes. Shadows rose behind him, the silhouette of something monstrous echoing the curse that had defined his fate. He steadied himself. He understood it now. The curse didn't only suppress magic, it fed fear into his nerves, turning any creature of darkness into a nightmare. Even this panic was part of Arcan's legacy. Alejandro stepped forward, sensing the spike of fear and declaring that the test was over. Ryun tightened his grip and refused. This wasn't enough. He moved before anyone could stop him, rushing the goblin as it shrieked again and charged in return. His footwork was rough, but his determination held firm. This time, he wasn't the weak child he used to be. His opponent was only a goblin, the smallest step on the road he planned to walk. He forced his fear down and reminded himself of the truth. He could do this cause compared to the crushing presence of the golden threat he once faced. This curse-driven fear felt faint. The goblin's shriek barely scratched him. That memory alone made the current threat feel small. The creature lunged, but Ryun pushed forward, closing the distance. Flames from the past flickered in his vision, charred earth, twisting shadows, a towering golden figure whose gaze had once shattered his resolve. Against that, a goblin meant nothing. He raised his wooden sword and struck. The blow landed cleanly, sending the creature stumbling back. Colin and Alejandro froze, stunned by the boy's sudden strength. Colin's face went pale, hands covering her mouth. Alejandro watched with silent awe. A notification appeared before Ryun. He had pushed through the curse, breaking past the weight that once held him down. The grade of Arcan's curse dropped, its influence weakening. Another message followed. His fear of monsters dissolved completely. The goblin trembled under his glare, sensing a shift it didn't understand. Ryun stepped closer, asking Alejandro for a real sword. His voice carried a certainty that silenced the entire arena. Colin worried aloud, but Ryun answered with nothing more than a calm, sharp smile. Alejandro felt a strange mix of pride and disbelief, realizing something inside the boy had changed. He believed Ryun had crossed a threshold he had never managed before. The goblin cowered, knees shaking. Ryun approached without hesitation. Shadows of the past clung to him, but they no longer controlled him. He lifted the sword high, and with a clean, decisive strike, he severed the creature's head. Blood sprayed across his cheek, but his eyes remained steady. Alejandro watched the boy with a quiet tremor in his chest. For the first time in years, he felt something warm rise within him, hope for the declining Sermon family. Colin stood beside him, eyes wide as he told her to observe carefully. Ryun's stance, his expression, the bloodied sword at his side, all of it made one thing clear. The child he once protected now looked unmistakably like the next head of house, Sermon. Ryun walked away from the goblin's corpse, its blood trailing behind him as he approached the manor. Later, alone at the washroom sink, he splashed cold water across his face. His reflection stared back, tired, tense, but steady. He acknowledged that the system's assistance worked. He had broken through Arcan's curse and proved that growth was possible. For the first time, the weight in his chest had loosened, but when he opened the status window again, he frowned. His experience had increased, yet the gain was painfully small. At this rate, he would need to slaughter thousands, maybe tens of thousands of goblins to rise even a single level. Time wouldn't allow that. He needed to move faster. Images flashed through his mind. Flames, screams, and the ruin destined to fall upon the Sermon estate. That day was drawing near. Still, he held on to the fact that he could overcome Arcan's curse. That alone meant he wasn't helpless. He tightened his grip on the glowing window. He couldn't waste this chance. The Sermon household was barely holding its place among the great houses. 2 years had passed since his father and older brothers vanished. Their enemies were quiet for now, but it wouldn't last. He remembered their faces, the cold schemes hidden behind polite smiles. The clock was ticking, but he had confirmed at least one path to leveling up. Ryun steadies his breath, the faint glow curling around his fist as resolve hardens behind his eyes. In that charged silence, he decides the next step. If brute force worked, then verifying the second method becomes inevitable. The great hall opens before him, and Sena arrives like a storm-given form. Her crimson hair drapes over a presence that needs no introduction, power rolling off her in waves, flames whispering at her heels as she descends the marble steps. Word of the goblin hunt had already reached her. She settles onto the velvet sofa across from him, blade-sharp gaze fixed on the boy she once dismissed. Even so, she asks why he called her here, whether it's truly for magic training. In Ryun's mind, memories stack neatly. Sena, captain of the Sermon family's magic corps, a 7th circle archmage, one of the few on the continent, rivaling even Alejandro, a woman wrapped in mysteries only the family head, his father, seems to understand. Her irritation reveals itself quickly. She reminds him almost lazily that magic differs from swordsmanship, that he had no talent, that they abandoned magical training because his body couldn't sense mana, nor wield a blade, nor show even basic scholarly aptitude. She speaks as if these facts are carved in stone, but Ryun remains calm. He knows all of it. He lived all of it. The curse of Arcan had stolen every talent he should have had, until yesterday. He leans forward, voice low with quiet defiance, asking what she would do if he could feel mana now. Her mask of confidence cracks instantly. Shock flashes across her face. The cup on the table trembles. And then Sena rises in a burst of flame, her aura erupting through the room, a phoenix-shaped inferno swirling behind her as if preparing to test him herself. When she tests him, drawing a mana-formed image meant to fool anyone beneath her level, he answers without hesitation, a red dragon, clear as day. Shock ripples through her. She even admits she disguised the spell deliberately, yet he still saw through it. He asks if he's wrong. Her answer comes out strained, no. Confusion colors her features as she circles him, muttering under her breath. Since yesterday, how could he have changed so much? Even the family curse shouldn't be something he could simply shed. She presses him harder. How did you overcome it? How did you suddenly grasp mana? And why? Why can he see through her illusions? He only shakes his head and admits what he needs. Even if he can sense mana, he can't use the Sermon mana refinement method, the one technique required to shape mana within the body, the one every Sermon relies on to grow. That's why he needs her. Her voice lowers, and her words turn heavier. Refining mana means opening one's body in a way that exposes everything: health, life, soul. If she helps him, she'll quite literally hold his life in her hands. Flames coil around her again, a warning and a test at once. Is he prepared for that? He looks her dead in the eye, unflinching. A small smile tugs at his lips. If she wanted to kill him, she could have done it any time. He can't even resist her as he is now. Ryun knew Sena was the only person he could rely on. Even in his previous life, when the ambush swallowed the estate in flames, she had stood before him. He remembered the heat, the collapsing buildings, and the way she cut down foes even as her own body faltered. Mana depletion tore through her veins, yet she refused to fall. She protected him until the very end. That memory hardened his resolve. He called her name quietly. When she turned, he told her the truth he had never said in his past life. He trusted her more than anyone. The words stunned her. A faint flush rose behind the mask, but she didn't look away. Soon after, Ryun knelt on the polished floor with his upper body bare, muscles tense under the faint glow of mana. Sena prepared the ritual, reminding him of the pain he was about to endure. He nodded without hesitation. She began. Scarlet energy unfurled around her like a living flame, illuminating ancient symbols carved into the air. This was the Blue Earth refinement method, passed only to direct heirs, a technique that shaped raw mana into the core of a night mage's strength. She had only taught him the theory before, yet she could wield it flawlessly. Ryun studied her movements silently. In his past life, he had trained under this method as well, using it to raise both level and physical attributes. Now, he would start again from the very beginning. Sena's voice cut through his thoughts, firm but steady. He needed to focus. He forced his breathing into rhythm, letting the warmth of mana creep through his skin. Sena placed both hands on his back, and golden light surged into him with punishing force. She warned him that the pain would be severe, that he must not cry out or resist. Ryun braced himself. Sena warned him to stop if the pain became unbearable. Her voice stayed firm as the mana storm thickened around them. Ryun felt the first wave tear through him, raw, scorching, and heavy enough to rattle his bones. Pain rose sharply, dragging fragments from his past to the surface. A blood-soaked room, chains, a white-haired torturer smiling through the mist of gore. His body trembled, but he refused to draw back. He steadied his breath and pushed through the memory. He had survived much worse before returning to this life. Mana surged again, and Sena's flow pressed deeper. Ryun clenched his jaw, sweat running down his arms. His resolve didn't waver. He reminded her, voice rough, that he trusted her more than anyone. That single truth drove him forward. Sena's eyes softened for an instant before she resumed the ritual. The refinement intensified. His veins glowed as mixed colors of mana twisted violently through him. Sena guided the force with both hands, but the curse responded immediately. Ryun felt it ignite inside him like a chained beast snapping awake. The system flickered before him, Arcan's curse activated, mana scattered. His body jerked under the impact, as the flow shattered again and again. Each time Sena poured more mana into him, the curse struck back harder, breaking apart everything she built. Cracks of golden light tore across his skin, forcing sharp breaths out of him. Still, she didn't retreat. She had expected this. Her voice stayed steady as she increased the force. The curse flared repeatedly, notifications ringing in his mind with relentless speed. Mana ruptured, twisted, and scattered through his core until his entire body shook. Ryun kept himself upright, refusing to collapse. Only he could see the messages, and only he could feel how the curse fought her mana with equal violence. Sena strained behind him, teeth clenched as she fought to shape the flow despite the curse ripping it apart. He knew the result clearly. Even the strength of a 7th Circle Archmage couldn't suppress a top-tier curse. But he didn't need her mana to win. He only needed to use the method he mastered in Adion. He allowed the curse to erupt freely, letting the burst trigger exactly as he wanted. Mana scattered violently throughout his body, but this time he guided the chaos inward. The moment it tried to escape, he forced its range to remain trapped inside his own frame. He would fool the curse and keep every fragment of mana for himself. His focus sharpened. The scattered energy spun wildly, but none of it slipped outside. Sena watched him in disbelief as the runaway mana stayed locked within his skin. The curse activated again and again. Frames flashed through his mind with each activation, yet he continued resisting, holding the mana like a net pulled tight over raging water. Notifications piled up in his vision until they blurred together. Heat surged through every channel in his body. Each path burned as if molten metal coursed through his veins. His breathing hitched from the intensity, but he refused to let the curse claim victory. This wouldn't break him. He had endured pain far worse. Blood and battle memories surged from the depths of his past life. Goblins, blades, and a roaring blue dragon he once commanded. His body had collapsed many times before, but his mind never had. He reminded himself who he truly was. He wasn't some powerless noble child. He was the master player who once dominated Edion. His mana understanding didn't come from this world. It was carved into his soul long before he awakened here. His body might have been weak, but his soul remembered every rule, every trick, every pathway mana could take. That memory stirred now, rising like an instinct. He channeled that knowledge, forcing the scattered mana to take form. His muscles trembled as the energy gathered instead of breaking apart. Light erupted from his frame, wrapping him in golden arcs as his control tightened. Arcan's name rolled through Ryun's fading consciousness like a cold nail. The skeletal wraith loomed above him, its blue flame hissing as it dragged its claws through the air. He heard the golden-haired monster scoff beneath it, amused, almost bored, claiming even Adion's so-called god had been nothing to him. Ryun's body answered before his thoughts did. Mana burst from his core in a violent bloom of blue light, cracking the darkness open. His stance widened, his burned muscles locking in place as the surge roared through him. From a distance, Sena stumbled forward, shock breaking across her face. She reached out instinctively, only for the force pouring off Ryun to shove her back. Then the backlash hit him. Heat tore through his nerves. His skin flashed gold, then purple, then raw. He crashed against the wall, sliding down as yellow sparks flicked off him like dying embers. She shouted after him, voice shaking, but he barely heard it. Pain swelled until it swallowed everything. Yet, a colder memory cut deeper. The iron room, the chains, the blood soaking the stone beneath him, the surgeons debating if they should cut off his arm just to test regeneration, the quiet suggestion that perhaps he was a failed specimen they should simply dispose of. Compared to that, today's agony felt almost gentle. The blade whistled. Someone screamed. A body hit the ground. Ryun's vision swirled back into focus just in time to see a masked captor fall, split open by a sudden intruder. Another was carved down before he could even reach for a weapon. Panic snapped through the dungeon as the survivors finally registered what was happening. When Ryun came back to his senses, but Ryun wasn't looking at them. He was looking at the sky. Cold air rushed into his lungs. Moonlight painted the forest silver. Wind carried the faint scent of moss and freedom. He blinked, bleeding and breathless, unsure if this was a hallucination or salvation. The blood-soaked figure looming over him. Alejandro's ruined silhouette comes into focus. Ragged breaths, torn flesh, hands trembling as he cups the boy's cheek, as if making sure he's really alive. Ryun stares at him through the haze, disbelief cutting through the agony. Alejandro had come for him, had fought his way through hell to reach him. The old man forces a faint, broken smile as he kneels, arrows jutting from his back like cruel thorns, whispering an apology he's carried for far too long. He gathers the boy into a shaking embrace, holding him as though shielding him from the world itself, even as blood pools beneath them. Each breath sounds like it's tearing him apart, but his grip stays firm, protective, desperate, resolute. Ryun's vision wavers, memories bleeding into the present. The cell, the screams, the experiments, the hopeless nights where he had begged for someone, anyone, to come. Compared to that endless torment, this pain feels almost trivial, because now he isn't alone. When he finally wakes again, sunlight filters through an unfamiliar window, warm and gentle, a stark contrast to the nightmare he'd relived. His refinement had succeeded, but the dream claws at him, dragging old wounds to the surface. The relief he should have felt is swallowed by the weight of that memory. Still, he steadies himself. That tragedy won't repeat. Not now. Not when he finally has the power to prevent it. But that power must remain hidden, especially from the hyper-vigilant Feton family. He remembers their banner, the symbol looming like a silent warning. He's not strong enough to confront them yet, and one misstep could tear everything away again. When dawn finally bled into a new day, Ryun woke to the cold weight of that memory, one he wished he could forget but carried like a brand. The refinement had succeeded, yes, but the dream had soured the victory, dragging him back into the dungeon's echoing misery. He swore it would never happen again, not while he still drew breath, not with the means he now possessed. But that meant secrecy. It meant hiding the truth from Sena and Alejandro, even as they stood by his bedside with concern etched into their faces. Ryun felt guilty, but he couldn't burden them with the reality he carried, because even if he told them, would they believe a story like his? And would it help them at all? Their sincerity only sharpened the weight on his chest. Then came the test. Sena approached him with that sharp, unwavering gaze of hers, mana detection spell blooming around her like wildfire. The air shifted, heat swelling as she pressed her glowing hand toward him, and when her magic touched his skin, nothing. The golden light that had flooded him yesterday, gone, smothered as if erased from existence. Her eyes widened. Shock cracked her voice. She tried again, harder this time, but the result didn't change. His mana had vanished without a trace. Her breathing hitched. Yesterday it had been unmistakable. His body had pulsed with mana thick enough to touch. Now it was like sensing an empty void. Sena left the room in a rush, shaken by the result she couldn't explain. Ryun watched her go without reacting, only calling her name once as the doors closed behind her. Alejandro stepped forward instead, trying to ease the weight of failure he assumed the boy felt. He reminded Ryun that the goblin hunt had still been a success, and that swordsmanship could always become his path if magic refused him. His voice carried reassurance, but Ryun only offered a tired smile. He claimed he couldn't repeat the feat from before. The effort had drained him so much he could barely eat afterward. He even pointed to Sena's report as proof, playing the role of a child overwhelmed by his own limits. Alejandro seemed convinced, touched even, swallowing his worry with a shaky breath. Time passed. 2 months slipped by under falling snow and fading warmth. The mansion changed. Staff whispered in the corridors. Colin wandered its halls with worry etched deeply into her face. Ryun hadn't emerged from his room again, and the absence of the family head left the household strained. Only the madam worked tirelessly to keep House Sermon from collapsing under its own weight, and even she was beginning to falter. Servants gathered gossip in hushed tones. They wondered if the young master was avoiding his duties, or if his sudden display of talent had been nothing more than a brief flicker before dying out. Some even claimed that drastic change often meant doom, that perhaps he was destined to fade rather than rise. Colin bristled at their words, defending him with trembling conviction. She insisted Ryun had only been trying to meet everyone's expectations, but her voice cracked with fear, because even she didn't fully understand what he was doing behind that closed door. Servants told that word of Ryun's behavior spread beyond the walls of House Sermon. People across the kingdom repeated the same name for him, a title spoken with disappointment rather than fear. They no longer saw him as the young heir but as the scoundrel of a declining family. Colin tried defending him, insisting he was only 12, but the servants answered with cold logic. Expectations rose as the house weakened, and the boy's retreat only magnified their frustration. One servant admitted he planned to leave soon, and others were already preparing to follow. When asked what she would do, Colin had no answer. Ryun, meanwhile, quietly observed the thinning household. Even meals reflected the strain. Simpler dishes, cheaper ingredients, a taste of collapse settling onto his plate. To him, it confirmed that the family's finances were reaching the point he wanted, just as planned. He thought back to the version of himself who would have tried desperately to save the house, wasting what little they had left. But the Ryun shaped by Adion's memories saw things differently. He waited in silence, letting every misplaced hope drain away. Everyone lowered their guard in the face of his supposed weakness, because the moment to tear them apart was approaching. His thoughts drifted to the disappearance of the family head, then to the eldest brother and the mages who never returned. One by one, every search party vanished until there was no one left to send. The training grounds that once echoed with steel and shouting grew quiet, emptied by loss and fear. House Sermon now stood on brittle legs. Few knights, fewer servants, and no strength to recover. Even the retainers of other nobles, eager to curry favor with the next family head, turned stiff at the sight of crumbling order. The boy at the center of it all, Rion Sermon, lay sprawled across his bed, savoring the peace that came with being ignored. Freedom suited him. Being treated like dead weight had its perks. He lounged in the sunlight without shame, thinking how easy it was to act like a shut-in now that no one expected anything from him. But even so, the downfall moved slower than he hoped. A rich family, he reminded himself, could rot for 3 generations before fully collapsing. If he wanted ruin to come faster, he needed to push harder. Just as he plotted next steps, the door slammed open with a crack that shook the dust loose. Colin burst in, breathless, frantic. She shouted for him to get up. Training time. The night captain was waiting. She grabbed his arm like a woman dragging a corpse out of bed. Ryun's mind lagged behind his body, still half asleep, barely processing her urgency. She hauled him upright with a strength born from panic alone. He blinked. She fumed, and for a moment both looked equally horrified by the situation. Then Colin blurted it out, her vow loud and shaking. She who raised him, fed him, carried him since infancy, would never leave house Sermon. Her cheeks flushed with the kind of devotion that burned hotter than loyalty. Ryun could only stare, overwhelmed. She swept him out the doorway before he could think, laughing nervously at her own outburst. Moments later, the night captain appeared with the force of a thunderclap, roaring his name. His patience had clearly died sometime last year. He corrected the boy's sword grip for what felt like the 1000th time, insisting that true swordsmanship meant imbuing mana with each swing. Even if you failed, he said. Mana once felt was easy to reclaim. The old man hadn't given up on him yet, and the weight of that loyalty pressed on him in quiet, guilty ways. For previous months, Ryun had trained in secret, standing on his hands, controlling his breath, pushing his body under the skill known as body domination, a deadly technique from Adion used to deceive one's own physical state. Now he used it for simple training, afraid to let anyone catch him improving. Green aura wrapped around him, ghostly and unstable. His body flickered between forms as he forced the skill to activate. At his current level, it was clumsy and fragile. One sudden movement, and the illusion broke, but every day brought results. Experience increased, stamina increased, strength increased. Remembering previous months' training, Ryun gave a reason to leave, saying he has to bath. Alejandro tried to stop the boy, but Ryun didn't listen. In the bathroom, Ryun realized that the spell is still unstable. If he used with carelessness, then the domination will destroy. His status window reflected the quiet grind. Ryun Sermin, level 3, stats rising slowly, evenly. Good, smooth progress. 3 months of secret training were finally paying off. Once all his stats hit the 20s, he could begin true leveling. He planned his path carefully. First, obtain the ghost job as he once did in Adion, then raise necromancer and assassin to high rank. This time he would shape his fate differently, but as he walked the hall carrying a basket of towels, he paused. Alejandro stood up ahead, speaking with someone unfamiliar. A visitor, a guest. Then he recognized the man as Trino Hilder. Trino Hilder stepped forward, his ever-polished smile barely hiding the tension beneath. The general manager bowed lightly, cape brushing the ground as he addressed Ryun with practiced grace. Apologizing for interrupting the morning's training, Ryun accepted the scroll without a word, though the weight of it tugged faintly at his expression. Trino's presence here, it didn't match the memories of his previous life. Even so, the timing made sense. He must have come to deliver this letter. He unrolled it slowly, the parchment crackling in the quiet. A familiar deadline stared back at him, pulling a tired breath from his chest. It was already that time again. Inside, the message was clear, an invitation to the birthday banquet of Darren Kingdom's second prince, Kyle Darren. The same event that had once marked the beginning of House Sermon's descent. Ryun's jaw tightened, as fragments of a ruined future flickered through him. Dretya calendar, December 1892. That day, the day everything had begun to fall apart. He clenched the scroll, resolve sharpening behind his eyes. This time, he wouldn't let the pieces scatter. This time, he would place them himself. A puzzle piece slid into place in his mind, the final trigger in the long chain of his family's downfall. And now, he finally held control. The world shifted. Morning light greeted him as he blinked awake atop a carriage bench. The road stretched ahead, bright and deceptively calm. Trino greeted him with a polite smile, noting how soundly he had slept since their departure. Ryun muttered that it was thanks to Colin fussing over his travel wardrobe until late. He glanced out the window to see Colin still trailing them tearfully, having needed to be stopped from following them entirely. He sighed. He understood her attachment, but today's journey wasn't one she could join. Neither Alejandro nor Sena accompanied them, leaving only Ryun and Trino to travel. A sudden outbreak of monsters near the Dark Zone had forced Alejandro to the border, while Sena had been summoned unexpectedly by Madame Sermon. Thanks to the sudden crisis at the border, Ryun, only 12, was now traveling to the royal capital as House Sermon's representative. Trino tried to reassure him, insisting there was nothing to fear. No one in the Daeron kingdom would dare touch a direct member of the Sermon line. Ryun held back a dry laugh. That confidence only applied to the Sermon family of the past. In those earlier years, they could send any household member to royal events without issue. But now, with the family weakened, the head himself had to attend a prince's birthday in person. Their fall left no room for pride. He accepted this quietly. He was the one who had steered things toward this point. After all, Trino pointed out the city emerging in the distance. The royal capital, Dabaron, rose beneath the morning sun. Their carriage rolled steadily toward it, greeted by clean roads, wide fields, and the hum of a kingdom untouched by decline. Soon, white towers came into view. The castle stood tall, flawless in its shine. As the carriage entered the gate, staff lined the path in neat rows, forming a formal welcome. A young man stepped forward with practiced elegance, the second prince, Kyle Darren. He greeted them warmly, addressing them with the title the Sermons once earned through blood and duty. Trino returned the courtesy, offering thanks for the kingdom's hospitality. Ryun followed his lead, though a faint thought flickered through him. Hospitality. He knew better than to trust it blindly. From the city gates all the way to the castle, he could feel the eyes of the kingdom on him. Whispers stirred behind open windows, their tones edged with curiosity and pity. People watched the carriage pass and connected him instantly to the collapsing house. He walked through their murmurs without flinching. His rumors had reached the capital exactly as planned. The citizens' hushed comments confirmed it. Ryun's sermon, the hopeless delinquent. Even among the nobles, Ryun could sense the same hushed mockery echoing beneath their polite smiles. Their whispers clung to him like shadows, filled with ridicule and quiet certainty that the sermon downfall was real. He read every hidden expression easily, each one feeding into the path he had already set. Everything continued exactly as he intended. He pushed aside the murmurs with a calm nod, greeting the crowd with a bright, harmless smile that masked the cold calculation beneath it. The nobles reacted with a mix of confusion and pity, whispering behind their hands. Trino covered his face in embarrassment, while nearby women traded amused comments. Ryun wondered how long he should keep playing the role they expected of him. Inside the castle, the escort knights gathered at a small table, sighing over soup as they discussed how early they had arrived. They reminded themselves that showing up ahead of time was meant to help Ryun mingle with the other young nobles. Instead, he had hidden in his assigned room since the moment they stepped inside. One knight muttered that Ryun hadn't greeted anyone properly when they first arrived. Another complained that he hadn't taken a single step outside. The youngest knight burst into tears, lamenting how the celebrations were already underway. Food, drinks, women, and yet their young master refused to move. Frustration eventually pushed the captain to send the youngest knight to persuade Ryun. He walked in on Ryun already dressed, announcing to the others that the young master finally intended to attend the banquet. Ryun stepped into the hallway with easy confidence, asking for the escort knights to accompany him. In truth, he had spent the past few days sharpening his training in private, uninterrupted. Handstands, breath control, subtle mana work, small motions hidden behind closed doors. Attending the banquet would simply be the next step. Ryun stepped onto the balcony, letting the morning light wash over him as he weighed the next move. Attending the banquet, he decided, wasn't just to placate the escorts. His gaze sharpened, a quiet fire settling behind his eyes. He had a larger purpose, one that demanded he step into the open today. A carriage rolled into the capital's grand estate, its wheels echoing against stone as crimson smoke whispered a single warning. Today, someone troublesome would arrive. Inside the banquet hall, the announcer's voice carried across the gilded ceiling just as the nobles turned. Young Master Sun's Feton had entered. He strolled forward with practiced elegance, trailed by uniformed retainers, soaking in admiration like it were his birthright. The steward Truno greeted him, flustered but polite, whispering that Prince Kyle would be surprised he attended in person. Sons only laughed lightly, pretending modesty as he scanned the room. When he asked after Ryun's sermon, his smile tightened. He already knew the boy wasn't present yet, and somehow that displeased him. Whispers gathered like smoke. People murmured about Sun's brilliance, about reaching six-circle magic at 15, but the tone shifted quickly. His family's sacrifices, his show-off tendencies, his insults in the Dark Kingdom's own territory, his rumored misdeeds, drinking at 11, killing a citizen at 12. Sons brushed it all off with a graceful flick of annoyance, insisting the culprit behind such rumors would be punished. And then the hall shifted. The announcer's voice trembled before bellowing louder than before. The Dragon of Drea, Ryun Sermon, was entering. Light rushed in through the doors, and Ryun stepped forward calm, composed, and nothing like the rumors Sons had clung to. Sun's pupils tightened as he watched attention flood the hall again, and not toward him. Again, the sermon name devoured the room's admiration, overshadowing him without effort. Ryun walked through the crowd, earning murmurs of surprise. He looked nothing like the omen of downfall they'd been whispering about. If anything, he wore his family's dignity with ease. Sun's jaw strained as jealousy licked up his composure. The glow in Ryun's presence irritated him more than any rumor ever had. Even now, even here, the sermon air pulled every gaze. At last Ryun approached him with a courteous bow, addressing Suns by name as if greeting an equal. He mentioned hearing plenty about him from Lathis, a name that soured Sun's expression even further. Suns forced a confident smirk, insisting he too knew much about Ryun, before repeating Lathis's supposed comment that Sun's Feton was a very odd person. He mentions the academy, how Sun's reputation spread faster than his footsteps ever did. Even the brief chaos Sun's caused during those few months had left a stain impossible to scrub out. Sun's jaw tightens. Ryun keeps speaking, almost kindly, but every word digs into old wounds. How Sun's bullied a classmate, tormented another, and cornered a girl until she cried. Ryun recounts it all with casual ease, as if describing weather patterns. Sun's face shifts from discomfort to trembling fury. Ryun doesn't back down. Trino came in frame to avoid the conflict between both as mentioning, young Master Ryun had some emergencies. While leaving, Ryun mentioned that the captain once had a message for him, but Ryun forgot. Sun stands frozen, humiliated, his aura burning hotter. Ryun walks off without a backward glance, only the faintest mocking smile curling at the edges. Sun finally snaps. He spits Ryun's name like poison, fury lighting his eyes. Rage floods out of him, raw and ugly, until he's practically shaking with the need to lash out. Ryun watches from the shadows, his expression shifting into something darker, sharper, pleased. He invites Sun's silently. Get angrier. He wants Sun's rage to bloom, wants it to consume him, because that fury is not a threat to Ryun. It's a tool, a seed, for the Ryun's plan. At night, Manor slept under a bruised blue sky when the flower exploded into ice across the floor. Ryun's name left Sun's mouth like a curse. Ryun's sermon, spoken with the kind of exasperation that only a lifetime of irritation could sharpen. Sun's mind lingered on Ryun instead, the boy whose reputation haunted every corridor of the academy. Ras, the brother of Ryun, already knew the truth, of course. He always did. Sun never left the academy by choice. He had been thrown out, quietly smothered beneath Feton's influence. Even though the higher-ups buried the scandal, the story clung to him like smoke, and when Ryun mentioned the knee, the humiliating injury that Sun swore would never be spoken of again, the man froze. And then it finally appeared in the memories, as Ras' voice cut through the air, as he declared that Sun had crossed a line no one should ever cross. Sun stammered out excuses, insisting he didn't know the girl was Ras's lover, claiming he had only treated her kindly because she came from a powerful family. But Ras only stared, expression colder than steel, reminding him that before titles or stations he was still a student, and he used magic to torment a girl. Ras's final demand struck harder than any spell. Kneel, beg her forgiveness, or face death stripped of all noble protection. Sun's composure shattered, his breath spiked, body trembling as he felt the weight of the threat settle over him like chains. His pride crumbled. In the end, he sank to his knees, humiliated and cornered, while Ross and the trembling girl looked down at him through a haze of shimmering magic. Sun stumbled away from the humiliating memories. He tried to steady himself, telling his mind that the plan couldn't stop here. Ryun was only a piece of it. The one who truly mattered was Ross's younger sibling, the variable he still intended to silence. Even with that resolve, he couldn't shake the truth. Ryun had dragged him straight toward a terrible fate. The thought made his breath shudder as he forced his legs forward down the palace corridor. A hooded figure guided him through the hall and ordered him inside. Suns obeyed, stepping past the heavy doors with lingering resentment burning in his chest. Then he froze. He realized the midnight summon had drawn someone far heavier than the usual conspirators. Standing inside was a man whose presence carried the weight of an entire house. Truno Hilda, chief steward of House Sermon. Outside, night deepened, and the sermon carriage moved across the landscape under the full moon. Within it, Ryun rested with a composed expression, satisfied that every intention he had brought to the banquet had succeeded. He had shed his old reputation and settled into the image of a disciplined heir, while letting Suns leap at the bait exactly as he wanted. As Ryun reflected on the night, he smiled faintly. Suns had behaved just as expected. Truno Hilda soon arrived before Ryun, praising his dignified performance and claiming it had restored a faint spark spark of hope for House Sermon's future. Ryun accepted the compliment without hesitation. Though he admitted he had created conflict with Sun's family instead of nurturing alliances, Truno dismissed the concern and admitted that watching Ryun confront Sun's had been unexpectedly satisfying. Just as the carriage rolled deeper into the night, Ryun's expression shifted sharply. A single gesture ignited power around him, drawing Truno's alarm. The steward stepped back, confused and shaken as the carriage seals tightened. Ryun met his stare without hesitation, questioning why the steward adjusted the carriage's soundproofing, and repeating Truno's earlier words about the lingering spark of hope. His tone hardened as he stepped closer. If Truno truly believed House Sermon still had a future, then he should have never betrayed it. The statement made Truno's composure crack, forcing him to demand how much Ryun actually knew. Ryun did not answer directly. Instead, he admitted that Truno may have acted out of necessity. Because of that, he would offer him one chance. He urged the steward to listen carefully and judge the truth for himself, as he had always done. The carriage continued under the bright moon as tension built. Ryun tells steward Truno Hilda his plan in silence. Hearing this, steward Truno Hilda was quite shocked, whereas Ryun's words settle into the carriage like a blade laid gently on a throat. He leans back, legs crossed, calm enough to terrify. Truno's face crumples, fear, guilt, desperation all fighting for space. He stammers, asking how the young master orchestrated everything, asking how young master could even think of something so foolish, voice shaking as if he already knows he won't like the answer. Ryun's gaze sharpens. He doesn't raise his voice. He doesn't need to. Truno keeps repeating it, young master, until the dam finally breaks and he sinks into a trembling sort of admiration. Tears glimmer, hands clutching at nothing. He wants to cheer, he says, as if witnessing a miracle, or a monster being born. Ryun watches him with a faint smile, seeing exactly what choice the man has made. Then he shifts, calling out to Chief Truno with casual ease, announcing that they've already crossed the royal road. A cold shiver runs through Truno. This child, how can he smile knowing what is coming? Then he realizes, this smile isn't just a smile, it's something cruel, something chilled to the bone, a smile steeped in murderous intent. Outside, the carriage jolts as its wheel cracks. Horses falter, the escorts panic. Someone shouts, asking why they stopped. Another barks at them to move, but then the air changes. One knight gasps, poison. A figure wreathed in poison came forward, face twisted into a painted grin. Arrows of light rip through the dark as knights fall back, shouting the only word that fits, ambush. Soldiers tensed at the shout to protect the young master, but the next warning hit harder. Those arrows carried mana, and hesitation could mean death. Barriers ignited like golden domes as the mages scrambled to form a shield, their light clashing against the oncoming barrage. Still, knights rose in fury, roaring that House Sermon should never be attacked so brazenly, that the enemy should be on their knees begging for mercy. Their bravado cracked the moment the next wave of attacks struck. Even allies were ordered to keep their distance. The protective enchantments were sharp enough to cut through friend and foe alike. Then came the panic. The carriage trembled, its glow twisting unnaturally, and the young master simply vanished. Fear spread faster than the mana-laden arrows. A chilling light swept over the forest, and the captain could only stare upward as his voice broke. What was this? From atop a shadowed horse, Clock Truno approached, his aura splitting the mist like a blade. Ryun's body hung suspended, drenched in swirling magic. Darkness activated around him, followed by sensory distortions, and finally physical abnormalities stacking one after another, as if someone was preparing him for something unimaginable. He opened his eyes with a measured breath. Too much time had passed. Someone had layered far more spells on him than necessary. Also by now the Sermon family guards must be in chaos. He remembers everything. His past life unfolds before him. The frantic search, the family's collapse, and the ruin that followed his kidnapping. But now, with foresight and power at his fingertips, he sees opportunity in the chaos, an incident he can drag forward, reshape, and weaponize. Ryun lost in his thoughts as he calmly lays out the strategy to Torino before this attack, he tells. Meanwhile, Torino trembles, torn between fear and the weight of the boy's chillingly precise logic. The young master offers him a choice. Let this incident mark Sermon's downfall, or transform it into the spark of their revival. How the noble families fear the rise of Sermon, how they will inevitably unite to crush them, and how he deliberately planted rumors to lull them into lowering their guard. Yet one family, Feton, has taken the bait too eagerly, sending assassins even now. He smiles sharply, eyes gleaming red. If their hostility is inevitable, then they can be used. Meanwhile, Torino trembles, torn between fear and the weight of the boy's chillingly precise logic. The young master offers him a choice. Let this incident mark Sermon's downfall, or transform it into the spark of their revival. As the last and present abnormal spell shatters, everything has gone exactly as calculated. He lifts his gaze, energy surging. Meanwhile, Truno trembled as he carried Ryun, stammering apologies under his breath. Ryun, half-conscious but steady, told him to follow the plan. The order left no room for hesitation. Truno swallowed hard, knowing it was the only route left to earn forgiveness. Inside the boy's body, restrained mana shattered its bindings. A surge of green light wrapped around him as his magic power rose, abnormal effects breaking one after another. All his stats reached their threshold, unlocking a new sense. Ryun accepted the change without surprise, noting that the first growth condition had finally been met. Under the moonlit ruins, cloaked figures waited. Their leader's sons approached on horseback, satisfied with what his subordinates had captured. He praised the group and remarked that he never expected Truno Hilda, the chief steward of House Sermon, to come in person, holding Ryun in his arms. Truno kept his head bowed while Sun mocked him for selling out his own young lord. The insult stung, but Truno endured it silently. Sun's Peyton stepped forward, taunting him further and comparing him to a dog that dared bite its master. He claimed that betrayal should be paid for quietly. Then came the scroll, the proof Truno had traded everything for. Information from the Asan family's intelligence network, famed for accuracy and secrecy. Inside was what Truno desperately sought. News of the long-lost direct descendants of the Sermon family. But even if he'd known where to look, he could never have afforded it. The Feton family, with their vast wealth, could always outbid him. Once the transaction was complete, the heir of Peyton's sons Peyton dismissed him with a casual wave, assuring him that Ryun would be returned unharmed, the lie dripping with amusement. Truno, believing there was still hope, begged them to keep their promise. The heir agreed smoothly, though his eyes made it clear he meant none of it. As Truno rode away, clinging to a fragile sense of duty, the Phaeton heir watched him disappear into the woods. One of his subordinates quietly asked if they should eliminate the steward, but the heir refused. The Sermon family would soon discover Truno's betrayal on their own. He didn't need to dirty his hands. He turned back to Ryun, smirking as he spoke of a larger plan already in motion, one that required the boy's return to unfold perfectly. When asked if he would carry out the final task himself, he nodded with cold enthusiasm. A sharp burst of motion cracked through the air. Sun's sudden strike shocked Ryun, revealing he had remained here intentionally, even while facing the traitor who sold him. Above them, moonlight split, shadows stirring as the next phase began. Suns yanked his head back, smirking as he asked if Ryun could finally grasp the situation. His fist sank into the boy's gut with a dull crack, forcing out a strangled breath. Ryun's eyes sharpened, a faint green glow stirring beneath the pain. Suns laughed, unable to hide the delight twisting his face. A direct descendant of the Sermon family, hanging here like a beaten stray, he savored the sight as he paced in front of the chains. When Ryun choked out Suns' name, the man answered with cold amusement as if it were some grand performance. He claimed he'd kidnapped the prized bloodline of the Sermons, then leaned in, asking whether Ryun understood what came next. Ryun lifted his head in defiance, and Suns mocked him for it, his grin stretching thin with cruelty. He taunted him about the banquet hall incident, noting how much he seemed to know. The mention of Ras wiped the smile off the boy's face for a flicker, and Suns caught it instantly. He leaned close, whispering that Ras had told him many things, but conveniently left out one truth. Suns' smile sharpened as he stabbed that truth into him. How much he wished Ryun's father and brothers were dead. Blood splashed across the stone. He demanded to know how Ryun dared oppose the Feton family, striking him again and again. He shouted that Ryun should know how he ended up here. Betrayal. His grin widened into madness as he declared that Truno had sold him out. Sold him for scraps of information about his brother's whereabouts. No one would save him now, he said. His kidnapping was the spark to ignite war between Feton and Sermon, and the boy was the cornerstone. Nothing more. Ryun spat blood, muttering that Suns talked too damn much. A flash of green flared within his eye. Suns paused, confusion creeping in. Ryun's mana surged. A magic circle snapped to life beneath his feet, flooding the room with green light. Suns recoiled, eyes widening, unable to understand what he was seeing. Ryun muttered he'd waited for this day since returning to Drea. Suns whispered a broken what, as the circle expanded, only for everything to go silent. Nothing happened. Suns flinched, disbelief twisting his expression. Ryun's gambit was empty. He demanded to know if the kid really pulled that stunt just to buy a few seconds. But Ryun raised his head, eyes glowing, and told him he'd warned him. He talked too much. Dark mana constricted around Suns' throat. His voice collapsed into a rasp as he clawed at his own neck. Panic bloomed across his face. When he realized he couldn't form a single chant, silence magic circle. Ryun's magic had sealed Sun's upper circle spells entirely. Sun's breath turned ragged as Ryun asked how it felt, being a mage who couldn't cast. Desperate, Suns realized that he could still cast fireball magic without chanting, one of his few remaining tricks. purple flame exploded in his grasp, but Ryun only stepped forward unimpressed. He saw it coming, calling it predictable. A second circle spell was beneath his level. The blast erupted between them, and he absorbed it head-on, the system confirming his resistance with a cold flash in his vision. Suns launched another, third circle this time, but Ryun only smirked, asking if he really thought he'd just take it. Mana spiraled as the incoming fireball was intercepted mid-air. Sun's eyes widened when the blue light snapped over the battlefield. Mana disruption. His spell shattered like glass. Ryun explained it calmly. Any magic above a certain threshold was instantly nullified. Nothing Suns attempted would work now. It was useless. Suns lunged with a blade of condensed mana, but the moment it formed, it crumbled against an invisible force. The blue mana started coiling around Ryun's wrists as the chains clatter. Suns watches warily, unsure whether Ryun is bluffing or preparing something lethal. Ryun raises his hands calmly, mana threads snapping the last remnants of the binding spell. He tells him those chains mean nothing to him now, and the glow intensifies as circles bloom around his arms. His voice stays cold as he warns that the magic doesn't stop at 2 circles. A third circle unfurls, humming with electricity. Lightning detonates. The spell slams into Suns, paralyzing him mid-step. His scream ricochets against the stone floor as the current crawls over his body. Ryun watches, unblinking. As the shock drops Suns to the ground, another pulse hits. He writhes, helpless, while Ryun barely moves, the blue glow rippling across his skin like calm water. He steps closer, expression flat, and tells him to look around. The tables have finally turned. Suns became unconscious. When Suns stirs awake, groaning, chained upright, Ryun sits nearby, twirling the dagger he stole from him, mentioning casually that he would have woken him himself if he took any longer. Suns thrashes against the iron cuffs. Stunned, they still hold. He blurts that he can speak again, only then realizing they're nothing but cheap restraints, not mana seals. He barely gets the thought out before blue lightning rips through him again. His scream fractures into the dark chamber, body convulsing as if the spell claws straight through his bones. He gasps, confused. There's no magic circle in sight. Ryun answers with a faint, mocking calm. Did he really think a mage would be bound without preparation? Ryun holds a dagger to his face and reveals he has already drawn a magic circle across Sun's body. Suns reacts with shock as the dagger strikes. Sun's chest bears a glowing, intricate magic circle made of scars. Ryun explains this is the forbidden art of carving magic circles into flesh, known as the blood circle. It's cast while the target is kept awake with an awakening spell. Ryun recalls carving similar scars into a 12-year-old boy years ago. Suns questions how Ryun knows the spell, noting he shouldn't be able to use mana. Ryun credits memories of a past life and experience in a place called Adion. He explains how mastering a mana link method allowed him to level skills quickly. Every skill has a unique circuit, and mana injected into the player's circuit activates the skill. Being a master player, he can perceive and remember every circuit of every skill learned. Ryun thanks Suns for walking into the trap, stating the magic circle will amplify the pain Suns intended to inflict. Now, Suns will feel it firsthand. Suns screams in agony as the magic circle takes effect, causing an explosion in the distance. He pleads for the torture to stop. Ryun offers to end it for now, but he says Suns would have kept silent and begged for his life to avoid being killed upon their arrival. Ryun recalls the elite unit directly tied to House Feton, a group known for operating in secrecy and force. Suns, battered and restrained, insists he is telling the truth. A violent surge of magic erupts around Suns as his body reacts to the mark embedded in him. The seal ignites, spreading through his body and forcing another scream from him. Ryun watches the reaction calmly and tells him to continue shouting if he wants. He has no intention of interfering further. Suns calls Ryun's name, but Ryun has already moved on. Surrounded by layered magic circles, he prepares for the people who will arrive soon, House Feton's elites. He knows they will reach the place within a week, and he sets his preparations with the expectation that none of his actions can be sloppy. 1 week later, the elite squad from House Feton reaches the location. They confirm it is the correct place and report that the young master entered with Ryun a week prior and never came out. With no contact received, they summoned Lord Ake to intervene. Ake questions whether anyone else has approached the area in that time. The squad responds that no one has, explaining that they have been strictly monitoring every passage. The Feton operatives moved through the cavern's dim passage, their cloaks dragging across stone. One of them clicked his tongue as the entrance's traces confirmed the situation inside. He stepped forward, power gathering around him like a dense violet haze while the others stayed back. Ake shifted his grip on his weapon, deciding that capturing the sermon boy alive would be simpler if handled personally. With that, he advanced, the magic around his body tightening as he prepared to enter the chamber. Inside, he reminded the others that the family head's orders came above everything. Even blood relatives weren't exempt. The acknowledgement hung in the air as a ward shattered at the chamber entrance. declaring he would enter alone. He dismissed the others to wait outside. He then walked down the corridor, his steps echoing as residual magic drifted around his boots. Something felt off. He sensed an ominous presence in the structure, yet no mana signature accompanied it. His eyes scanned the walls in silence. A sudden magic activation flared beneath him. He reacted instantly, calling up a barrier as foreign energy patterns spiraled around the floor. He judged the traps as interconnected magic circles, laid deliberately and with precision. Whoever built them knew the dungeon layout well and had significant skill. Every path was rigged. He couldn't determine whether House Sermon or another party was responsible. The complexity forced him to raise a double barrier just to stay unharmed. He analyzed the situation quickly. With traps laid across every corridor, he didn't have time to waste countering them one by one. More circles activated in the distance as he pressed forward, choosing speed over caution. He muttered that he didn't know who his opponent was, only that they'd regret challenging. A finger of House Feton. Inside the dungeon corridor, the iron door creaked open to reveal a trail of fresh blood. The trail led to a cell where a boy hung in shackles, his body torn open and soaked in red. A surge of power detonated from above, ripping the ceiling as Ake forced his way down. He landed in front of the captive just as chains shattered under the impact. He called out for the young master, uncovering the boy from the debris, but the scene made no sense to him. The boy's chest was torn open by magic he recognized immediately. Sun's Feton's power. Sun's body was torched like this that even Ake did to realize that the boy was same Sun's Feton. He checked the patterns around the room and noted the trap circles embedded in the floor. Whoever set them knew the layout well and had laid traps on every route. Sun's was alive but barely conscious. Ake noted that the enemy had subdued him, drew blood, but hadn't taken him away. That meant rescue wasn't their only goal. He pulled Suns, preparing to withdraw, analyzing the magic circles and the silent opposition. The enemy still hadn't shown themselves, which made staying any longer too risky. Ryun was also still captured. That means the team that came to rescue Ryun is still somewhere in this dungeon, or house. Therefore, Ake can't lower his guard down. He studies the restraints around him and recognizes the trap laid out for the intruder. Even so, he decides he cannot abandon his own mission. Then Suns came conscious, identifying Ake before him as the one responsible for his current state. Ryun Sermin. Ake readies a high circle binding spell, intending to immobilize him completely. As the spell begins to take shape, Ryun notes that the caster is overly cautious, right before another figure drops from above and disrupts the spell. The explosion forces Ake back. He tries to unleash his attack, only to realize the target was an illusion. The disruption triggers backlash, injuring him mid-cast. Ryun reveals himself again amid a swarm of duplicates, noting that Ake should have dealt with him first. Ake stabilizes his stance, calling forth a massive illusion-breaking spell. He claims mastery over illusion magic and unleashes a wide purge, commanding all false images to vanish. A burst of magic spreads through the chamber as he performs full illusion removal. The air cracked open in a violent surge of violet lightning, as Ake unleashed raw force, tearing through the illusions that had crowded him. The clones dissolved into shreds of green light, peeling away like mist in a storm. Ryun moved the instant the illusion collapsed. Silent, fast, slipping through the chaos with a hunter's precision. His steps blurred into streaks of emerald mana, each motion weaving past Ake's widening field of awareness. Ake realized too late. His vision caught Ryun's eyes, cold, bright, unshaken, and then the world tilted as Ryun leapt high, twisting through the air in a tight arc. Green swept downward. Ake raised his staff out of reflex, slamming down with enough force to crack armor and bone. Ake staggered, furious, barely retaining his balance. A blur of motion interrupted the moment. Suns landed behind Ake, his dagger carved across Ake's throat, leaving a spray of crimson mist. Ake choked. The strike was clean, brutal, and final. Blood burst from Ake's neck as the grip tightened. Ake tried to speak, but only a wet rattle escaped him. His eyes shifted, confused, as Sun's half-ruined face came into view. Blood trailing down pale skin, green energy burning behind one eye. He simply watched Ake's arrogance collapse under its own weight. His voice low and steady as he faced Ake's fading panic. He asked if the man even understood soul transfer magic, then revealed the truth with a calmness more terrifying than his wounds. Sun's soul lay unconscious inside this stolen body, bound by the spellwork drawn across his skin. And because the family head forbade killing him outright, he knew Ake would hold back just enough for him to exploit. The bloody circle burned faintly on his torso, its runes layered with more than pain amplification. There were sigils meant for severing, for claiming, for swapping, magic designed to move a soul and puppeteer the flesh it entered. He admitted this was the real trump card, the one he'd been preparing while Ake's focused on illusions. The binding flared, and the backlash hit him like fire, but he gritted through it until Ake seized the robed man completely. An explosion ripped through the chamber, sending Ake crashing into the wall in a broken, crumpled heap. Flames licked across the floor as Ryun and Sun's body stepped through the embers. half-burned, half-bloodied, but victorious. Green sigils crawled up his torso while he stood over the defeated Ake, whispering that he'd caught him. The transfer held. He poured a potion over himself, letting the liquid sizzle across fresh wounds. Notifications flickered. Pain resistance formed, then strengthened immediately. Before he wiped blood from his eyes, he muttered that it hurt but needed to be done. He needed an injury made by Ake, visible and unmistakable, to set the next part of his plan into motion. Then he lifted both arms toward the ceiling, laughing shakily but triumphantly. He had done it. He defeated one of Feton's fingers, a seventh circle monster, and claimed his victory without hesitation. Sun's is in Rion body, and Rion is in Sun's body. That's kind of confusing, so let's address Sun's as Rion is in Sun's body. Rion was celebrating as a notification appears stating quest completed and level has increased. Rion questions the concept of a quest and acknowledges having leveled up. Next, a display shows Ryun's level jumping from 2 to 15. Ryun reflects that this level increase is a natural result of defeating an opponent named Ake, but seems to have some reservations. Ryun then wonders if the level increase is due to the earlier quest, but decides there are more urgent matters to address. He drags Ake by his leg to prepare his next plan. Ake's body laid in a chamber, whereas Ryun explains that the circuits are engraved on the soul rather than the body, allowing the use of magic power even with a damaged body. They then proceed to pour magic power into the prepared circuits. Ryun notes that the level decreases according to the amount of lost magic. A notification appears stating level has decreased by 5, an additional condition achieved. Ryun receives the Shadow class, described as an assassin's hidden class available for transfer under specific stat conditions. Finally, Ryun acknowledges the success of the process, but notes that with his levels, he could attempt the ritual 2 more times. The magic circle activated, pulling in the surrounding energy until the chamber filled with blue light. Power surged around him as he initiated the next sequence. System prompts flashed, job change successful, additional conditions met, and the transfer to the Necromancer's advanced class, Hand of Death, confirmed. Cards materialized and dissolved into him, expanding his arsenal. He reviewed the result. One of the 2 attempts succeeded, matching the required condition. With his level boosted further than expected from defeating Peyton's subordinate, he calculated the next step. If the 3rd job change succeeded with the levels he still had, he could push for the hidden class. The ritual intensified. The spectral form of the ghost class flickered above him, its requirements and synergy aligning perfectly with his previous assassin and necromancer lineage. He analyzed its conditions, normally tied to unlocking the sense stat and dependent on soul capacity. He acknowledged the risk. Over-processing job circuits meant the soul might fail under the strain. A backlash was possible, but if successful, his plan would accelerate significantly. There was no hesitation left. He began the final attempt, channeling everything into the prepared circuit. Light spiraled upward, the system drained 5 levels, and the backlash hit instantly, violent, unpredictable, and far more intense than he expected. His vision snapped wide as the ritual reached its critical threshold. Pain spreads as the ritual destabilizes, and the system warns of soul damage and required recuperation. His vision blurs. Flashbacks of past deaths and corpses flicker through his mind. As the ritual tries to consume him, he steadies himself, forcing the spell to continue, refusing to stop even as the backlash cracks through his body. He reasserts control, pushing his remaining strength into the circuit. He declares his intent to obtain Ghost's advanced class regardless of the cost. The final surge erupts, the spell reaching completion. A system window confirms it. He possesses a soul of sufficient size. The hidden class is unlocked. The system prompts him to select a hidden class, and the sealed option unlocks with a sharp flash. A new card materializes, revealing the advanced class born from Ghost, Phantom. He studies the name, noting it as something unseen even in Arden. The Phantom's form rises behind him, its spectral power overshadowing the skeletal guardian at his side. The system confirms the link between Ghost and its evolved form, explaining that the fundamentals should remain similar. Ryun with blood-streaked skin smiles, claiming he finally acquired everything he wanted. He prepares to resume his original plan, standing before the ritual table where Ake's body lies drenched in dark energy. He reflects on Ghost's passive ability, enhancing a necromancer's power, and shifts his focus to the corpse of the 7th Circle Archmage he killed for this purpose. He begins channeling the next step, hoping the material holds together. If the attempt works, he believes he can shorten several stages of his plan at once. He activates the spell, calling forth the skill, Lich Creation. Normally requiring a necromancer over level 70, it becomes possible now because the material is a 9th Circle Mage. power built inside Aka's corpse laid out before him, yet the surge cracked apart, dissolving into a failure screen that hovered mockingly in the air. Lich creation had failed, but the system responded with a colder alternative, prompting the activation of a special undead. His eye widened at the sudden shift. Dark energy rippled outward, tearing across the room. Tendrils rose like living shadows, swirling around his body as the corpse dissolved into a storm of obsidian mist. The floor trembled, the air contorted, and from the spiraling void, a tall, armored figure emerged, silent, regal, and drenched in violet malevolence. The system confirmed success and asked if Ryun wants to name it. A column of light detonated into the sky, sending a shockwave across the estate. The cloaked guards who came with Ake turned in panic. They demanded answers, searching desperately for the young master they were sworn to protect. Ryun and Son's body staggered from the smoke, charred clothes barely clinging to his skin. His steps were slow, measured, each one dragging the weight of the ritual behind him. The guards froze as he approached, dread creeping into their voices. He lifted his gaze and declared the truth with an unsteady breath. This chaos was the work of Ake. Before they could react, he spat the accusation at the knights, insisting one of Feton's own had betrayed him. His battered state made the claim obvious, yet he continued, pointing out how they still failed to understand. He explained how he had trapped the young master with an artifact, though the restriction wouldn't last long. With that, he announced his intention to flee with Ryun's sermon, using the others to stall for time. He climbed onto his horse, ordering the group to buy him enough time to return to the family. Reinforcements, he promised, would follow immediately. If they held their ground until then, he vowed they would be rewarded. The underlings recognized the urgency and prepared to move, watching him disappear into the dark forest. Later, the scene shifted to a military camp. The knights reported this as the last sighting of the young master. Inside the command tent, Sir Pyres listened. As a seventh circle mage of the Feton family, he questioned the report, demanding confirmation that no trace of Ake had been found. Frustrated by the incomplete information, he crushed the documents in his fist. If the report proved accurate, the implications were serious. He asked whether the group before him were the only witnesses to what occurred that night. The robed subordinate stepped forward, confirming that they were. Then suddenly he is cut down by masked knight without warning, his armor splitting as the slash drops him to the floor. Pyres doesn't look back. The body collapses behind him as he continues speaking. He reviews the disappearance of the young master, noting that one of Feton's fingers was involved in the sermon kidnapping. If word spreads, the families will face complications. A guard tries to halt him, blade drawn, but the intruder ignores the threat. The MA attacks, only to be disarmed and hammered aside with a single movement. The intruder steps forward through swirling frost, revealing a silver-haired warrior, none other than Alejandro. Under the moonlight, he asks what difference it makes if he advances. Under the moonlight, he asks what difference it makes if he advances. He declares that he will kill every one of them. Pyres reminds him that entering another family's territory without notice can be seen as an act of war. Alejandro demands the return of young Master Ryun. Pyres answers that Feton invited suspicion. A border barracks burned down exactly 1 week after Ryun vanished, alongside the strange underground structure they uncovered. As they confront each other, he argues that Feton's sudden presence here makes it look like they're covering something. Pyres responds that they do not know where the Sermon Patriarch is, and even their own young master son's Feton is missing. He requests cooperation in the search. Alejandro cuts him off, telling him to stay silent. Pyres' irritation rises as the standoff deepens. Alejandro steps forward, stating that the scene cannot be disturbed until their investigation is finished. Frost gathers around his hand as he prepares himself. His power flares, and both he and the red-haired commander, Pyres, lock eyes, magical pressure building between them. Neither moves, but the air between them distorts under the clash of their energies. Truno from above notes the unexpected appearance of Feton troops, hoping the confrontation doesn't escalate further. Before he can finish, the masked fire mage drops from above and cuts him off mid-sentence. She lands in flames, calling him a traitor. She warns that if not for the young master's message, he'd already be ashes. She commands him to stay silent, unless he's speaking about the young master's search. Truno explains that the young master promised to leave behind a trace. The two search the forest, questioning whether such a trace could even appear in a place like this. Truno replies that if it were easy, the Feton dogs would have found it already. They continue deeper. Truno recalls that only Sermon's rare earth refinement method could locate such traces, and since the young master had succeeded once, some lingering resonance should remain. Sena releases green energy, spreading it across the forest floor. A hidden reaction surfaces. The resonance flickers, then stabilizes. She narrows her eyes, scanning. She finds it. A surge of green light erupts from the ground, rising like a pillar. Truno freezes, shocked at what he's witnessing, demanding to know what this phenomenon is. He watched the body suspended in that sickly green radiance. The forest around them pulled into an uneasy stillness. The energy wound upward like a tightening noose, dragging the body higher until his silhouette vanished into the glare. Sena and Truno stood below, their shoulders tense as the glow throbbed. The body's face surfaced in the light, drained, hollow, barely recognizable dot. It was Sun's body. A single line of script burned across his skin, stark and deliberate, the message forming before their eyes. I am the kidnapper. Please punish me. The spell released him. His body collapsed, and the glowing tablet dropped beside him, humming as it stabilized. Sena's gaze sharpened. She scooped it up with a flick, scanning its contents as her mask reflected green fire. Truno asked for traces of their young master. Sena barely answered, catching the faint shimmer of a letter tucked beneath the remnants of the ritual. She unfolded it, the paper glowing as the hidden imprint activated. The young master's words drifted through her mind. He had considered destroying the Feton family from within, but the family head's domain and soul transference made that path suicidal. If he returned as Ryun's sermon, the families might collide in open war, something the weakened sermon estate couldn't withstand, so he chose disappearance. He left them this explanation, a final thread he hoped Sena would follow. Sena read in silence as Truno hovered behind her, confused. She finished the letter, flames curling around her fingers as she burned it to ash. They would return to the sermon estate. War could not be allowed to ignite. Whereas somewhere, a lone bird burst into the sky at dawn, racing ahead as if carrying the weight of everything left unsaid. Its shadow skimmed rooftops and stone. A boy named Lion cut through the morning crowd. Someone called out to him from behind, but he didn't slow until the message reached him. The guild leader wanted him immediately. Sena, elsewhere at the same time, lifted her mask just enough to catch the trail she'd been searching for, confidence settling over her like a shadow. The young master still lived. The boy turned slightly, revealing a single green eye burning with draconic brilliance. The rumors whispered across the kingdom hadn't exaggerated. He walked as the dragon of Drea reborn. 3 months passed. Feton, the capital, thrived beneath clear skies and steady commerce. But beneath the peace, whispers lingered. A standoff between House Feton and House Sermon. A crisis narrowly dissolved by negotiation. Citizens traded rumors freely. A traitor from Feton had taken the last Sermon bloodline, they said, and Sermon had accepted reparations without ever retrieving their missing heir. Some argued the family head had vanished long before, leaving the house weakened. Others muttered that the compensation mattered more than the child. In the streets, Ryun, who is now living as a boy named Lion for 3 months, wove through the crowds, catching fragments of every passing conversation. But the truth traveled differently, slipping through alleys and quiet corners where the Assassin Guild's emblem hung untouched by sunlight. Scene shifted as Lion passed through an alley leading to the Assassin Guild's Paneton branch. The ornate crest hung over the doorway, as rumors inside continued. Executions, betrayals, and Alejandro's swift justice against a steward who had cooperated with the Feton traitor. Inside, Sapphire, the branch leader, leaned back in her chair, dismissing the latest wave of reports as things they already knew. Her companion growled into his drink, recounting the execution with simmering resentment. Sapphire only sighed, wondering aloud why one of the continent's few swordmasters had handled it personally. The door creaked open, drawing their attention as Ryun, who is now living as a boy named Lion, stepped in. Sapphire greeted him coolly. He returned the gesture with equal calm and approached. Duns asked whether he was here for the leader, and Lion nodded. Sapphire rose from her seat, the warm glow of lantern light framing her as she announced that today was the day. She lifted a sealed envelope and asked whether he understood its weight. When he answered, she confirmed it herself. It was a recommendation, naming him an official member of Martin. He only smiled faintly, noting he still had 1 test left. Sapphire smirked, agreeing that it was true. His first real combat awaited him, but she wondered aloud whether such a test could even challenge someone like him. Behind her, the guild banners unfurled, dragons flanking the emblem of Martin, the 4th largest among the assassin guilds. Founded by the noble family of Mount AK, Lion stood before her, silent and unshaken, while she assessed him with narrowed eyes. Considering he had reached the final test in only 2 months, she admitted, the speed was absurd. Lion sits across from the woman. She speaks of a remarkable talent born in their branch, someone who rose through the guild faster than anyone in a century. Lion listens quietly, the wax-sealed letter resting near his hand. She tries to downplay it, comparing herself to the branch leader, a renowned A-rank assassin. Lion answers with the same stillness as always, offering no praise, only watching her with unreadable eyes. Sapphire notes how his expression has softened since their first meeting. Lion doesn't comment, focusing instead on the warm cup in his hands. She said briefly, 2 months have already passed since he arrived at this hidden assassin guild, a place the public barely knows exists. He had appeared at their doorstep quietly, money in hand, with with no background and no hesitation. Sapphire remembers the moment clearly, a drenched boy with mismatched eyes, dropping a heavy pouch of gold onto the counter like it was nothing. She recalls the odd, sharp feeling she had then, that this client wasn't someone she'd encounter again in her lifetime, and the request he made that day was even stranger. A kid who looked like a beggar walked in with a fortune and asked them to assassinate someone, Ryun's sermon. She admits anyone would be curious. Ryun, or say Lion, simply lifts the sealed letter again, choosing to read it alone. She nods, stepping back as he quietly asks to be called when the test is ready. She agrees. When Lion left, she approached the sealed door, its hinges barely moving as she tested it. A presence drifted behind her, cloaked in violet smoke, asking whether she had admitted the boy based solely on an instinct. The figure materialized fully, its voice low as it reminded her of the usual procedures. She ignored him. Her thoughts stayed fixed on the boy who had completed an assassination curriculum in a single month, training that normally required years. Whereas the figure named Carl reported the results of his investigation. The boy called Lion had no surname, marked by blue hair and green eyes. He was a street orphan raised by an unidentified master. One day that master vanished, and the boy joined their ranks searching for information. He had even requested an assassination mission to prove his eligibility. Carl had revisited the remote house where the boy and the master had supposedly lived. Fresh traces confirmed someone had stayed there until recently. Then for now, Sapphire shifted focus to the more pressing question. She asked the possibility that Lion was actually Ryun's sermon. The shadowed figure Carl recalled the missing young heir of House Sermon. Ryun had vanished, and at the same period a mysterious boy of the same age appeared here. She questioned whether it was coincidence, bothered by the overlap, though she recognized the statistical impossibility. The masked figure asked why. She recited the known facts. Ryun's sermon lacked every form of talent, mana, combat ability, physical strength. His life had been marked by failure and ceaseless pressure. He was universally labeled the disgrace of the sermon line. There was no plausible way he and Lion could be the same. The figure offered to continue tracking him, but she dismissed the idea. She refused to waste a valuable operative on something so insignificant. She murmured that Carl should focus on uncovering the truth about the Lion's master. Elsewhere, Lion sat quietly, green energy drifting around him, whereas Sapphire clearly ordered that if his master truly raised him, that person had to be extraordinary. Lion heard that through magic, and noted that the woman's intuition was sharper than needed. The necromancer's ability proved useful. Through souls, he pulled information from distant places. When he called for a status window, the golden panel revealed Ryun's sermon's stats. The levels spent during his job change had returned. He confirmed his investment into body domination had paid off, not just for altering appearance, but for concealing magic entirely. Not even mana detection could catch him. The skill had grown enough to deceive second-class assassins. Before 3 months on that day, the phantom materialized before him, swirling with green and violet energy. It awaited his command, awaited a name. He gave one, Cornac. The creature responded, its presence expanding, its stats and skills appearing like a player system. Strength, agility, magic, everything displayed in crisp detail. Ryun examined it with quiet calculation. A growing undead, phantom power fully realized. The creature's form solidified inside a purple frame, shifting like an evolving weapon under his control, and he recognized it for what it was, the true power of a phantom. He lifted his hand, green circuits pulsing beneath his skin as if the magic itself were thinking. He noted that the anomaly in his summoned creature wasn't mentioned anywhere in the skill description, and decided to probe the circuit a little deeper. A thin veil of light rippled, and he mirrored the gesture, his own circuits flaring to life. The patterns in their magic echoed each other, all aligning as though the skills themselves were communicating. Something hidden stirred beneath the surface of the creature's form, and an abrupt pulse of magic forced a status frame to materialize before him. A quest window, unexpected, impossible for this continent, hung between them like a riddle carved from light. He analyzed it quietly, realizing it resembled hidden quests that players once had to uncover and complete. The idea that a quest could be embedded inside a creature's skill circuit felt absurd, yet the evidence glowed in front of him. After defeating Ake, the quest completion notice had appeared just the same. Hand of Death, Phantom, and the quest logic fused together until the being called Cornac emerged from their collision. For now, Cornac was little more than an impressive curiosity, a creature that drained his experience points faster than it offered benefits. But he understood that its true usefulness would come later, when the requirements of power grew heavier. In present under the moon's cold glow, he lifted his eyes over the rooftops. He stood silently on the exam tower until an approaching voice broke the quiet. The instructor found him deep in thought and asked what kept him so focused here of all places. He told him he'd been thinking about passing the exam, joining the guild officially, and maybe one day even earning the right to lead a branch in Marathon. He laughed, saying that at his growth rate, He might very well reach that point. When he mentioned there would be 3 examinees today, 3 potential assassins vying for the same position, yet only one could pass, he extended his hand as he announced the final trial to determine the newest guild member and the next 5th-grade assassin. The competitors stepped forward one by one. First came Paula, quiet but intense. Then Lip, her gaze sharper than steel. The 3 cloaked trainees stand under the cold city lights. As their instructor begins the assessment, he orders them to state the target's information. They report succinctly. The target is Alrog, 47, a merchant with a respectable shop. He travels with 3 guards, 2 bronze-grade warriors and a silver-grade mage, and is rumored to visit his young mistress every night. Their surveillance continues. The mistress's room is visited at the same hour daily, and the mercenaries stand away during that time. The instructor acknowledges their groundwork but challenges the flaw. The test is tonight, and there is no certainty the target will follow his usual pattern. He questions whether the trainees can handle the guards if things deviate. They hesitate, unable to answer. He reminds them that the guild gathers information for such gaps, then shifts the attention to Lion. Lion steps forward when asked to share the results of his investigation. With calm confidence, he hints that must I really say it. He explains that even if they complete the mission together, they will not all become official guild members, since only one person passes the exam. Lion states that he does not see a reason to share information. One trainee questions what that makes those who already shared their information. His companion responds that they are still comrades. Lion replies that he never learned anything about comradeship during training, surprising the other 2. The instructor confirms this. He states that the exam is a test where individuals may use their abilities, but the important part is to apply what they learned during training. He adds that assassins naturally dispose of or use others as needed, and the boy's answer reflects the nature of an assassin. He asks if anyone has anything more to say. The 2 trainees behind answer no. The instructor then announces that from this point onward, they may freely assassinate the target. He watches the candidates run off and notes that one of them is promising. The trainer lost in his 3 months older thoughts. When group questions whether they are being asked to assassinate a kid, Sapphire explains the request. 10 3rd-grade and 3 2nd-grade assassins have been mobilized. The time limit is 3 days, and the location is restricted to within Payton. The reward for success is 100% gold, but failure requires accepting Loin into the Marcotte Payton branch as a special trainee. Trainer comment that the leader must be out of his mind. 3 days is unreasonable. Then he tells Loin to go hide, claiming he will find him within 10 minutes. That team eventually reports failure. They state the kid's traps and tricks are exceptional. Their superior keeps his word and tells Loin he will train him starting that day. He then reflects on the situation. It is not easy to become an official assassin of Martin, and this target has the highest difficulty ever designated by the branch leader. He considers that he might be witnessing a historic moment as Loin begins running forward to continue the test. Lion, or Se Ryun, drops through a window, shattering the frame as he lands inside the building. He completes his descent with controlled footing, and notes that he has successfully disabled the alarm magic and mechanical devices. He recalls that he had already managed to slip past the mercenaries, yet he had not expected additional guards. The men spot him and shout intruder as they give chase. He observes from behind a wall as a guard points down a path, ordering others not to lose him. He labels Paula as stupid and concludes that thanks to the distraction, his own progress remains smooth. He also notes that if Paula had not been caught, he would have been exposed anyway. He reviews the situation. The target has faced countless assassination attempts until now. During those times, the place the target always fled to was his actual wife's bedroom. Inside that room, the wife complains that taking a concubine was not enough, and accuses her husband of bringing assassins as well. The man insists it is not his fault, adding that the room has full safety precautions. She listens as he explains that the assassins are unrelated to him. The other trainee watches from a distance, confirming that security is better than before. The number of mercenaries has increased, identifies the mercenaries who always accompany the target rushing to protect him. Sensing the surroundings, detects the presence of 5 common soldiers nearby. Frontal breakthrough is possible and steadies his blade in preparation. Suddenly, the man lunged forward, shouting what she was doing and ordering her to put the blade down immediately, because it was dangerous. She said she had tried to endure it, recalling the times he whispered love to her in the past. She tightened her grip and admitted she couldn't do it anymore. She accused him of taking money from her family again. He attempted to explain it was because he lacked business funds. She cut him off, stating clearly that he had used that same money to buy gifts for his mistress. Then the knife drove into him. Blood splattered as he choked out a scream. She stared at the result, shocked, dropping the knife as blood ran down her legs. She muttered to herself, struggling to understand what she had done. She collapsed with another cry as her body gave way, falling forward onto him. Blood pooled beneath both of them. Voices approached. Someone shouted, asking what had happened to the madam. From the shadows, the trainee assassin noted that the target had died at the hands of his wife, and whether the mission counted as a success or a failure. Lion still hadn't shown up and found that strange. Later, at morning, trainee stood on the wall, concluding the mission had failed. Alrock had been killed by his wife, not by them. Lion stands watching the rooftop, whereas the female train notices that he has arrived before the others and questions why he reached the location first. Trainer confirms that Paula has also returned safely. He explains that the residents inside the mansion suddenly began fighting among themselves, and because of that distraction, he managed to escape. Trainer adds that the assassination itself didn't fail. He reveals the reason: Lion completed the mission. This leads to confusion among the group. The leader, or say Trainer, repeats that the mission is counted as completed because Lion was responsible. He elaborates by showing the evidence, the target. The explanation continues. Lion made Alrock's wife kill her husband. When asked how he achieved it, Trainer turns to Lion for clarification. Lion thinks briefly, predicting they already assume he will respond in his usual way. He finally agrees to explain and states that he will tell them. The female trainee reacted with surprise, and the narration shifted to explain the situation. The solution, shown through the figures of Alrock, his mistress and his first wife, lay between Alrock and his first wife. As the sun set over the city, Lion clarified the misunderstanding. When asked whether he had used the assassination target's internal affairs, she wondered if the branch leader had told him the target beforehand. Lion replied that he learned Alrock's identity at the same timing they did. Alrock was well known in Rainton, so identifying him simply by name had not been difficult. Trainee confirmed that Alrock was a liquor distributor and had taken in a new mistress. The information about the guard's rank in the mistress's bedroom had also been accurate. Lion stated that he had already finished investigating that information before they received it. He lifted a finger and continued. While the other two were still considering assassination methods, he acted based on his pre-prepared plan. That comment surprised both trainees. Girl asked him how he gathered the details so quickly. Lion corrected her. He had not only investigated Alrock, he had investigated everyone in the city who had a bad reputation or was at risk of assassination. He had collected information on all of them. A scene showed him gathering information among the townspeople. By getting close to the merchants and residents sensitive to rumors, he gained detailed knowledge. His 2-month training period provided him enough time to make preparation sheets for each potential target. That allowed him to respond immediately once the target was revealed. Both trainees silently recognized that he had studied the entire situation in advance, not only what was required for the exam. During this process, Lion discovered someone who held a deep grudge specifically against Alrock. That person was Alrock's wife, Kelly. The narration showed her past suffering and her deteriorating condition. Lion approached Kelly, who was mentally distressed because of her husband. Under a cloak, he subtly suggested the solution of hiring an assassin guild. Both trainees reacted again with shock. The narration then explained that Alrock had mistreated his wife and continued bringing in mistresses. He explains that Alrock continued his business using money taken from his wife's family. Kelly disliked him enough to consider killing him but did not intend for him to actually die. Lion states that he suggested she hire extra mercenaries and increase security so Alrock would be safe but frightened. When Alrock hid in the first wife's room, Lion explains that Kelly framed the commotion as the mistress acting with a secret lover, expecting Alrock to rethink his actions and return to her. Lion notes Kelly accepted this too easily due to her drinking. He adds that before the plan began, he delivered one more piece of information to Kelly, that the money Alrock used for the mistress came entirely from her family under the pretext of business travel. The trainee watching realizes the exam itself was within Lion's control. The trainer also realizes they were all being moved by him. Both candidates consider the events involving Kelly and find them logical. However, Trainer says a detail does not align. Regardless of her anger, a civilian woman stabbing her husband to death is unlikely. Lion responds that he provided assistance. He added a potion into the liquor delivered to Alrock's home so that if mercenaries attempted anything, the effects would activate at the needed time. The potion temporarily clouds judgment and causes easy rage. This explains the mercenaries beginning to fight each other. Lion touched his forehead lightly as he stated that he didn't want his guild member or trainee to die. The blonde trainee stiffened at the remark. The examiner or trainer reviewed the situation, noting that everything had unfolded exactly according to Lion's plan. With the information Lion leaked and the potion's effect, the enraged Kelly ended up killing Auroch. He went on to explain that assassination wasn't only about delivering the final blow. He then congratulated Lion for passing the exam. Lion pointed out that he should also receive the request fee and additional payment from Kelly. When asked what he meant, Lion clarified that Kelly becoming a murderer aligned with the truth. Assassins had infiltrated, and only they themselves knew that Auroch had been killed by Kelly under the influence of the potion. From Kelly's perspective, she would want to cover her husband's death as the work of assassins, despite the cost. The trainer stared at Lion, realizing Lion operated on a different level. Other trainees quietly evaluated him as well, concluding that from an assassin's viewpoint, his handling of the situation was commendable. They considered avoiding competing with him in the future. The trainer ordered the 2 remaining trainees to return to the guild. After they left, he told Lion he needed to speak with him. Lion waited silently. The trainer finally spoke, demanding whether Lion understood what he had done. He stated that Kelly would now live with the burden of killing her husband. Lion states until he knew the reason Auroch kept bringing in mistresses, he also thought Kelly was an ordinary woman. Lion states that all mistresses Auroch brought so far were handled by none other than Kelly. Auroch also ruined many lives with his illegal business. He explains that Kelly only stepped forward once. She was unable to handle the situation on her own. Auroch was tired of her but continued bringing in mistresses despite knowing what would happen to them. Lion states that the dead mistresses were viewed as simple disappearances, hidden by Kelly's family's influence. The families of those women are frightened and would not oppose Kelly. He adds that these facts were newly discovered during the investigation. He concludes that even if it was an exam, the request was still assassination. Even if Kelly didn't wish for Auroch to die, the guild receives full payment only if the target dies. He says an assassin does not judge whether a target deserves death or evaluate the client's circumstances. If conscience interferes, it does not stop being murder. Killing for money has no need for questioning reasons or methods. He says Kelly never stated she refused to kill her husband herself. She tried to use the guild's request to complete the act in her own way. Since assassins were undeniably involved in Auroch's death, the outcome stands. Lion tells the instructor that if he wants humanity, he must grow more powerful. He must grow strong enough to change things from the root. He adds that no matter how much the instructor searches for conscience, nothing changes under an assassin guild. After this, he leaves. Later, Lion appears at the guild hall. Sapphire congratulates him on passing the exam. She declares that from this moment onward, he is an official member of Martin and is classified as a 5-star grade assassin. Before Lion can say anything, the system declared his task complete. Another system notification descended, chiming as it informed him of the level he'd earned. The room watched him, faces shifting between disbelief and uneasy curiosity. Respect, unexpected and reluctant, followed close behind, stacking itself into tidy notifications he barely glanced at. Ahead, Sapphire resumed her professional smile, explaining his new status and the path upward. She outlined requirements as though expecting him not to care. Instead, he lifted a finger, repeating the criteria with a steady precision that made her blink. Her confidence cracked. The others whispered, confused why he was dissecting the rules like a ledger. He pushed further, asking for the value of the Auroch assignment. The question hit harder than any spell. She hesitated, stumbled, then gave a strained answer. 10 gold up front, 10 after completion. The watching students murmured as Sapphire reminding the room of the extra gold taken under the table to bury a body. Trainer stiffened at the revelation, sweat forming at his temple. The trainer's face blanched, disbelief cracking into a hoarse denial. Lion lowered his hand, the gesture slow and deliberate. He admitted the test might have been necessary, then reminds her calmly that he was the one who secured the contract, completed it, and even collected the extra gold she thought no one knew about. She steps back, rattled, but he closes in. The first promotion requirement, 30 gold from a single job. He states it without hesitation, forcing her to face what she already knows. Her breath trembles, fury rising, but he doesn't stop. She bares her teeth, the anger twisting across her face, only to freeze as he raises a finger and declares his intent with cold precision. Lion, 5th grade assassin, requesting promotion to 4th grade. The entire hall seems to tilt as silence hardens. She glares down at him, but he doesn't bow or flinch. Her power bleeds out like a storm as she steps forward, towering above him, staring him down as if waiting for him to fold. Instead, he watches her steadily. She speaks through grit teeth, calling him arrogant, accusing him of looking down on the guild, on tradition, on them. Others silently watch, their expressions shifting between fear and anticipation. She reminds him of the hierarchy, the pride the assassins carry, the rules that built their reputation. And then, with a pointed finger, she tells him he ignored everything, but he doesn't look away. Her voice sharpens. His results meet the requirements only technically, not properly. Acting like this, she warns, will only earn enemies. She tries to dismiss his request entirely, pretending she didn't hear it, pushing him to rest after his mission. He answers with a single word, "No, I won't withdraw my promotion request." Before she could escalate, the trainer stepped in, addressing the branch manager. He asked to speak, reminding her he had supervised the test. She allowed it. He stated plainly that the boy already met the qualifications for the 4th grade promotion exam. It wasn't arrogance, he added, but something he had held back during the test. That caught the room's attention. She turned sharply, asking what the boy hadn't shown. He answered, raw physical ability, not planning, not trickery, only instinctive physical execution. Still, the trainer continued, the boy's assassination results relied on clever strategy, not strength, and the 4th grade exam, he reminded everyone, couldn't be passed without physical ability. The branch manager glanced toward the training grounds. She muttered that this was a chance to evaluate the boy's true level, or teach him a lesson he wouldn't forget. The surrounding assassins murmured agreement, remembering how he outwitted them with traps alone during recruitment. Then she sighed sharply and gave her decision. She would allow the promotion exam, but she warned that even well-prepared assassins risked their lives in it. She leaned forward, asking if he understood what he was stepping into. He accepted without hesitation. She smirked as they shook hands, sealing the agreement. Later, they all sits at the Tyraven table, the teacher muttering that the kid is a master at stirring anxiety. He tells him Lion acted far too rashly. Across the table, the blonde trainee stresses that he must have his reasons, and he asks if he has a plan. Lion confirms that the 4th grade test won't be held for at least a month or two. The barmaid brings drinks. The teacher reminds him that a suitable assignment and target must be prepared, and offers to train him until then. Lion refuses and states he plans to rest until the test. Trainee questions the idea of rest. Lion explains he will be away from the guild for a while, and that as an official member he is allowed to leave the branch's territory. The teacher acknowledges it as true. Lion says he will return before the exam and check the schedule at the Martin branch when he comes back. The man repeats his words quietly, thinking about him leaving the guild, and asks if this is Lion's plan. Lion confirms with a short gesture. The man accepts it and says they drink tonight. From across the table, the blonde trainee scolds Lion mildly for drinking as well. Lion notes that free time like this will not come easily again. From the 4th rank onward, contracts must be taken consistently. With a branch head as the target, rest is impossible. Lion concludes he must go before the exam. He leaves the city gate, heads into the wilderness. He looks toward the distant boundary, the dark zone. He steps forward, cloak pulling tight, and marks it as the land of death. Scene shifts, and we see a noble's carriage rolled through the dark with its escort wrapped around it, armored riders scanning the empty fields without sensing the danger staring straight at them. The lead knight slowed first, his gaze snagging on the lone figure sitting calmly at the roadside. His brow twitched, confusion surfacing before tension settled in his shoulders. He guided his horse forward, irritation rising as he recognized the kid wrapped in a travel cloak, unbothered by the sight of armed knights. He demanded to know why the boy was here, but the kid only shifted, feigning a limp as he stepped into the light. The hood slipped just enough to reveal weary eyes and a bandaged ankle. He spoke in a steady, quiet tone, claiming he'd twisted his ankle and needed help reaching the next village. The lie flowed effortlessly, supported by a carefully staged injury, and the kind of calm no real traveler would possess in front of armed nobles. He added a touch of desperation. How the knight could kill him, how he'd been waiting for help. The knight scoffed at his audacity, calling him a brat, threatening him for daring to block a noble's path. But the kid stayed composed, reading the man like an open book. He picked apart the knight's excuses with unsettling precision, how his speech betrayed a lack of urgency, how their route made no sense if they truly had official business. Each observation hit harder than the knight expected, wiping the arrogance from his face. And then came the final blow. The kid clasped his hands together, sparkling, eyes shimmering with manufactured innocence, as he begged for help just this once, for the sake of a poor child. The knight's jaw dropped. Silence hung heavy. From inside the carriage, a voice finally cut through the tension. The noblewoman ordered her subordinate Kenil to put the child inside. Kenil rejected the request immediately, stating that it was absolutely not happening. The noblewoman asked if placing the boy on horseback would be acceptable. The captain Kenil eventually lifted the kid onto the horse, settling him in front. Another knight remarked that the captain suited the role well, prompting the captain to respond reluctantly. The captain asked the boy's name. The boy replied that he was Ryun and that he came from Feton. Lion now decides to tell these guys his real name Ryun, but not the Sermon's surname. Also, he is not in his Guild's territory right now, so there's no need to pretend like the name Whole Gold no. Lion. Ryun then added that he owed his life to the young lady. The captain acknowledged this, telling him to be grateful he had met her. Ryun simply smiled in response. The narrative shifted as Ryun explained that their meeting wasn't coincidence but planned. The Rose family, those who bore the rose emblem Saintine Rose, required escort, and he had to accompany her. Before departure, he had been surveying the route for potential dangers. During that time, he realized the Rose family's procession would be following the same path. The family had been living quietly in a remote region of Feinstroy, but after the family head unexpectedly died, she had been forced to flee. Being minor nobles on the frontier, those serving as her guards weren't trained knights. They had only been mercenaries for the Rose family. But once she went into exile, they were granted knighthood. One of the men commented on the hardships the young lady had to endure. Ryun noted that this was everything he had been able to gather: the death of the family head and Saint Rose's exile. He wondered how House Sermon was involved in the situation. Kapatan questioned whether House Sermon was truly behind it. Another knight added that he had heard something. The report states that Sermon assassinated the family head to hide proof of collusion. Ryun reacts sharply at the claim. Night covers the camp. The sky is lit by the moon. Group rests around a fire, tents and a wagon nearby. A few knights stand alert with their horses. Others cook over a pot while one sleeps. Ryun sits by the wagon reviewing what he learned today. From the contact and gathered information, he concludes that the Rose family's fall originates from a recent conflict. The conflict was between House Sermon and House Feton. Sermon belongs to the kingdom of Dargon, Feton to Feinstroy. The connection began when the Rose heir, stationed near their territory, became a knight for House Servin. During boundary duties in the Dark Zone, the heir was killed by monsters. Servin, honoring him, promised significant aid to the Rose family. Another noble house, the Anil family, opposed the Rose family's rapid rise under Servin's support. Anil communicated with Feton, using the tension between both families. This escalated into the assassination of the Rose heir. Behind the dispute, rumors claimed the Rose family acted secretly for Servin, and that Servin fabricated the cover-up by killing the Rose family. The Rose family later discovered that the heir's death was orchestrated by the Anil family, and protested. But against Feton's growing strength, supported by Servin's decline, their resistance failed. After losing their head and falling in status, the Rose family set out into exile toward Dargon. Few individuals knew the correct internal circumstances. Keenel, knighted to protect Genton Rose, stayed loyal. Some retainers also remained inside the Rose household. Even they were assembled hastily by Keenel. Their path into exile would be dangerous. The camp lies quiet under the night sky while the young lady sleeps inside her tent, curled up on the bed. Captain mutters that the Ani family's second son had been staring at her. It isn't House Sermon that's rotten, but House Feton and the Ani bastards. Around the fire, Captain says the truth is that the asylum request was only possible because House Sermon secured the kingdom of Daron's approval. He adds that Sermon even scraped together the last of its strength to support them. He raises a hand in a casual salute, calling for a toast to House Sermon. Laughter follows as bowls are lifted. One knight offers Ryun another bowl of soup, and he accepts. The knight apologizes for boring him, but Ryun answers that it was interesting. Internally, Ryun notes that if they only knew how deeply he's tied to House Sermon. He's asked whether he's sure everything is alright, traveling with them, sharing stories, when he was the one blocking their path, begging for help. Ryun only chuckles. Another knight observes that Captain Kennel seems lighter after venting, but they agree the one suffering most must be Lady Saint Rose. Ryun drinks quietly, thinking the real problem is Saint Rose. Maybe the knights are inexperienced, because neither Kennel nor the others have realized how dire things are, nor sensed the danger racing toward them. The Ani family, who conspired with Feton, won't settle for just killing the Rose family head. They especially want the second son. Word spreads of assassination requests. He's not even 20, yet he's already had 3, all rejected for being too risky with poor pay. A vicious brute preying on the weak and poor, paranoid about his own safety, surrounded by guards, nearly impossible to assassinate. If someone like that has his eyes on Saintine Rose, the threat is severe. Ryun realizes this is no time to sit in a peaceful little camp. He slips away into the woods, confirming a tail has been following them. He considers taking them out, but decides traps are more efficient. He sets them along the route, intending only to slow the pursuers. When questioned about being covered in dirt, he claims he slipped while relieving himself. They believe him and tell him to rest. Internally, he notes he's laid enough traps and gathered the information he wanted. Their ties end in the next village anyway. He counts that as payment for the soup. Morning comes. As they reach the fork in the road, he thanks them for taking him this far. They ask why someone so young has business near the Dark Zone. He says he works as a peddler too, planning to buy monster materials in Daysolg and sell them in Fantol. They confirm they'll part ways here. Captain Kennel hands him a small bottle, saying the young lady asked him to give it to him since his injury likely hasn't healed yet. Through the carriage window, the lady looks out silently. Captain Kennel recalls her words, that thanks to him they managed to find a brief moment of peace. He quietly holds the red vial. Kennel says he must go now. He tells him they'll be staying in Baron from now on, so he can come if he ever needs help. Ryun replies that even if he does, he shouldn't come looking for them. The soldiers comment that the captain may seem rough, but he's a good man. Even without the young lady's orders, he found a way to help. One says he's prickly, and before he finishes, the captain shouts at them to leave already. He walks away alone. He examines the red vial, opens it, and drinks it. A few drops fall to the ground. He keeps walking. Hoofbeats grow louder behind him. Riders advance rapidly. He senses them and identifies 6 pursuers. He sees 2 ordinary mercenaries, then 2 novice swordsmen, then a mage who will definitely be a nuisance. He sensed the shift before the dust even settled. Ani's second son burst forward, his manic grin cutting through the chaos as he roared a name like a battle cry. The man rode like a beast unchained, hunger and cruelty blazing in his eyes as he closed the distance. Ryun braced himself, cloak whipping around him as the ground trembled under charging hooves. Their gazes met for an instant, predator and prey, before he slipped sideways. He landed lightly, breath steady, eyes narrowing. The pursuers weren't just persistent, they were skilled, stronger than he'd expected. His traps, useless, and all of this for a single bowl of soup. He almost laughed at the absurdity. He lifted the empty vial, frowning. That potion alone was worth 20 silver, far too generous for such a fleeting encounter. She'd handed it to a boy she barely knew, then ran for her life. He couldn't begin to guess what thoughts raced through that girl's mind. But the Rose family? They didn't stand a chance. The invaders would kidnap their heir, butcher the rest and call it strategy. He sighed once, low and resigned. Too much pay for soup, but when he included the potion, it felt like advance payment. If he chased the horsemen directly, more would die before he reached them. So instead, he stepped into the glowing sigils unfurling beneath him, green light coiling like awakened spirits. He looked down at the circle, an ancient caller, a pact older than kingdoms, then whispered to the presence waiting within, "If I borrow your strength, we can end this quickly." The air split with a pulse of magic. A figure rose within the circle, lean, sharp-eyed, wrapped in emerald fire. Ryun lifted his hand, the summoned spirit mirroring the motion like a dark reflection. This would be Kornak's first task, whereas the escort advances down a dirt road toward the mountains. Riders surround the carriage. Captain Kennel glances back and says they need to hurry. He informs the lady that they will be moving faster and asks her to bear with the carriage shaking. One of the knight asks why the sudden change. The captain answers, "Pursuers, mana users, are on their tail." He shouts that the border is right ahead and orders everyone to move. 2 knights, Chaku and Gaian, are told to take the lady straight to the border if the pursuers catch up. Once they reach it, even the Ani family will not be able to touch her. They will not risk provoking the barren border guard. He tells them to go, and that he will buy time. The knights answer that they will meet him at the border. He thinks that the Ani knights are far above someone like him, who is knighted only by luck, but he is still a knight of the Rose family. The pursuers appear. He confronts them and demands to know who they are to chase the carriage of House Rose. He orders them to withdraw at once and warns that if they refuse, he will take their heads without mercy. One of the hooded riders laughs and repeats his words, asking if he intends to take their heads. They mock him, asking if he thinks being knighted makes him something. Captain Kennel recognizes him. G. Garuta Ani, one of the underlings Ogji Garuta, warns him about revealing his identity, but he replies that they are going to kill all of them except the lady anyway. He orders his men to bring the woman before they reach the border. They respond with "Yes, sir." They charge forward. Captain Kennel yells, demanding where they think they are going. An explosive spell lands. He reacts in shock. He identifies the attacker as a mage, and notes that they are at least second circle. Garuta says this guy will handle the knight himself, knight to knight, and adds that it will not change the fact that the knight will die here. Kennel recognizes the other guy with Garuta, Captain Saiso. He wonders why the former captain of the Rose Knights is here. Garuta answers, "Money." With the Rose family gone, he asks if they expect him to starve. Garuta says it has been a while, so they should entertain him properly. Captain Saiso steps forward into the fight. Their blades clashed. Kennel demanded to know if they had no sense of knighthood left. Captain Saiso scoffed that the world had changed. There was no chivalry left in Fenestroy. He struck again, urging Kennel to give up. With his talent, he could still swear loyalty to a better lord. Kennel spat back not to spout nonsense. The enemies discussed finishing him and assumed Shenton must already be captured. Captain Saiso offered cold apologies before attacking, but a sudden blast struck him from behind, sending him flying. Captain Saiso jerked around in shock, demanding to know who it was. A green vortex tore open, and a glowing figure emerged, eyes blazing, power wrapped around them as they struck Captain Saiso, burning through his armor. Energy spiraled again as the figure, none other than Kornak, gathered more force. They launched forward, overwhelming the battlefield with a storm of green magic, forcing the enemies into panic as the attack consumed the area. Captain Saiso dropped to a knee, poison eating through him as her power thickened the air. Above him, the spirit and the cloaked boy Ryun aligned like two halves of one presence. He demanded payment, his voice cutting through the battlefield. At some distant thrum followed, and a soldier's visor cracked in the distance before the man collapsed, his blood soaking into the dust. A second fell moments later, his body thrown beneath a shattered wagon wheel. The two surviving knights steadied themselves, trembling as the toxic air thickened. One muttered that the force was far beyond anything they could withstand. The other stared at the assassins closing in, their orange hoods swaying lazily as if they were already bored of the hunt. One waved his blade carelessly, telling them to crawl away if they planned to cling to their title as knights. The pair could barely stand. Before the finishing blow came, a calm voice cut through the chaos. The young lady sent in Rose stepped from the carriage wreckage, her dress torn, her red hat casting a shadow across her eyes. She thanked the knights for lasting this long, then lifted a dagger to her own throat. She said she would go with them if the others were spared. If not, she would die here and now by herself. She warned that their employer would not want that outcome either. The attacker identified her as Saintine Rose and claimed she was misunderstanding something. He explained that since she never reached Daron, she was no longer a noble or anything at all. He said he had no reason to listen to her. She reacted with alarm as the man swung his blade. He threatened to show her what happens when rebelling against a knight who can wield mana. He grabbed her and held a blade to her. A knight shouted for his lady. She flinched as the attacker tightened his grip. Suddenly a figure dropped down and struck the attacker's head, knocking him away in a burst of blood. Saintine reacted with shock. The hooded figure continued the assault, forcing another attacker back. The injured man demanded to know who the intruder was. Ryun said he had been planning to cover his potion debt, but after dealing with trash, he figured he would still owe money. He kicked the man aside and asked if Saintine intended to pay for the potions and salves up front. Saintine stared, whereas Ryun mentioned about hiring a Martin assassin for this request. She repeated the word Martin, then assassin. Shocked, the defeated man wondered why Martin would be here, and why someone from Martin would help the Rose family. Saintine recalled the Martin emblem, and wondered if, being Martin, he was a direct descendant of Asian. She shouted 30 gold. He noted she was quick to understand the situation but added there were conditions. He told her to write it down. 30 gold, he explained, was barely enough to take down the knight she had just seen, let alone deal with the family's second son, the former Rose Knight commander. He added that even a 3-circle mage would find that amount far too little. The beaten knight cursed him. Ryun ignored him and told Saintine to decide quickly. If the contract wasn't finalized, he had no reason to stay. Saintine realized that if he left now, their entire escape plan would collapse. She clenched her fist and decided there was no time to worry about consequences. She resolved that, if it was for protecting the family, she had no choice. Saintine hesitated, sweat forming on her lips, then promised she would give him everything he wanted. She pleaded, and Ryun accepted. Green energy rose around him. The wounded man muttered about Ryun calling himself an assassin while showing his face. He recalled how people claimed assassins should hide their identity, but Ryun dismissed it as something only timid cowards said. Ryun added that a real assassin made no mistakes, and stayed confident even when revealed. Ryun moved, striking the man and cutting him down. Blood scattered as the man collapsed. Saintine glared at Ryun. Ryun reflected on his first official contract as a Martin assassin, and how the reward was everything the Rose family owned. He considered that such a reward required a fitting reputation. The injured man shouted for him not to speak nonsense, and questioned whether Ryun thought he could defeat them so easily. Ryun simply questioned who us referred to. Suddenly another knight attacked Ryun from behind, but he dodged while he crashed to the ground, sliding to a stop at the knight's feet. The knight mocked him, asking how long he planned to stay down. Another reminded him the opponent was a Martin assassin from House Asani and should be taken seriously. Ryun rose with green energy coiling around him. The knights attacked together, claiming his job from the Rose family was a mistake and boasting about their synchronized, position-shifting swordsmanship meant to make him regret it. Ryun muttered that he had heard enough. A system window flickered to life, stating that body control had activated. His movements sharpened as another window appeared. Body acceleration activated. Green aura surged as he closed the distance instantly. One knight swung and missed, shouting in frustration. His partner scolded him for acting alone, insisting they match timing and counterattack together, but Ryun repeated that it was already too late, and placed his hand on the man's face, stating he had already hit them with body weakness, blackout, and auditory distortion skills. The man realized it was a curse-type skill. Green energy surged over him as he shouted, accusing Ryun of even having necromancer abilities. Blood burst across the battlefield as Ryun launched his next strike, cutting through the man. He followed by telling him to feel the suffering of the dead left behind in the Rose family, ending the fight as the man screamed. A sunrise spread across the mountains and a caravan stood by the water, with horses and survivors regrouping. Kenil hurried forward, calling for his lady. Covered in dust and blood, he approached and asked if everyone was okay. From the group ahead, Saintine called out to him by name. Saintine brightens when she sees him and says he's safe, relieved that he's unharmed. She watches him quietly, while Kenil checks on Cyan and Chaku, asking if they're all right. They explain the captain took down the pursuers, and he reminds them they were supposed to meet at the border. The two hesitate. Kennel adds that a mage suddenly helped them, and after defeating both the traitor and the mage, they captured the Garita man as well. The others look at Ryun, wondering if he was involved. He forms a magic circle and sends the captured man crashing to the ground. Kenil then asks why Ryun is there. Saintin explains that the boy claims to be an assassin from Martin. Kenil thinks to himself that he expected it. He notes it explains why the mage fell so easily. The prisoner, Gurata, repeats Martin in distress. Gurata tried to bargain for his life, offering double and then triple payment, insisting the Rose Woman must have deceived Ryun. He reminded that House Hassan's creed concerned only the client's goal, not the client personally. Ryun added that he talked too much. Gurata stated that as long as he will pay, nothing else mattered. Gurata tried to continue, but Ryun cut him down. Blood splattered as he fell. Ryun asked how Gurata dared treat him like a bargain bin assassin. Facing Saintin, Ryun explained he had no idea what the Rose family had promised him. He added that Martin did not tolerate skipped payments. He reminded her she should already understand what kind of organization the Assassin Guild was. She forced a smile, agreeing. Ryun said he wasn't expecting immediate payment and understood the Rose family's current situation. He asked her to officially file the 30 gold contract with Martin and said the remaining verbal agreement would stay between them. She accepted. Ryun ordered them to gather themselves and keep moving. He assured them no one else would follow and that Martin would handle the bodies. He instructed them to tell the border guards they were attacked by bandits. The guards understood. One noted how thoroughly Ryun handled things. As Ryun turned to leave, Kenil called out to stop him, but Ryun activated a green spell and vanished. The two standing before the swirling energy watched as the vortex collapsed. One knight muttered that he had vanished. Kenil stated the attacker was an assassin from Martin but noted that wasn't the full story. He recalled Lion calling himself an assassin as Ryun didn't told his real name to them, yet the summoned creature was not normal undead. The creature moved with unusual power and even spoke human words for a moment. It took down Siso and the mage almost simultaneously. He added that someone who could command undead of that level reminded him of the legendary necromancer Veda. He suspected the hooded assassin might be Veda's disciple. Saintin reacted sharply at the name Veda, saying Lord Leon had disappeared long ago. She asked if the attacker was a necromancer like Veda. He described the undead as one capable of using magic while fighting like both a high-rank mage and swordsman. He added that such undead were rare on the Drea continent, but this one was on another level. Nearby knights repeated that Leon was Veda's disciple, and said the impact of that being true would be enormous. Saintin murmured Veda's name again. Facing everyone, she ordered them not to speak a word of what happened. She said she wasn't talking about Gurata's death. His death could spread freely. The body lay in blood as Kenil protested, calling her my lady. She continued, explaining that the one who saved them was a man who appeared with nothing more than a cloak, a hood, and a single potion. If there was even a chance he was the disciple who inherited Veda's legacy, they needed to hide his information. What they must hide, she finalized, was Lord Leon's information. Kenil silently noted she was not the same lady who left the castle. Her eyes didn't look like those of someone who had lost everything and fled into exile. She asked Kenil if he could still move. He answered yes. She instructed him to return to Feton and formally commission an assassination from Martin, just as Leon or Ryun had said, and have them arrange Gurata's assassination. Kenil hesitated about leaving now, but she replied she trusted Leon's words that no further attacks would follow. It was too late to prepare for one anyway. She told them to focus on what they could do now. They would secure their place in Drea. She vowed the restoration of the Rose family. The knights stiffened at her declaration, and Kenil watched quietly. Saintin gathered everyone and urged them to move quickly, offering to repair the carriage. Magic circles formed beneath the group as they prepared to depart, while Ryun separately examined a glowing green spell in the forest. He thought of House Rose, recalling that a rose was never simple. It always carried hidden thorns. From now on, those thorns would reveal themselves. The thought made Ryun tense, his magic flickering. He remembered the incident that turned dark mages into a taboo on the demon continent. The war that drowned everything in darkness, known as the Black-White War. It began when all the dark mages of Drea rose at once, slaughtering countless people in their obsession to summon the Demon King. Using that blood, they brought forth demons, then conquered the small southern kingdom of Rako, and even attempted to summon the demon realm itself. War erupted. Demons poured into Drea, engulfing the land in flames. Humans and other races fought back against dark mages and monsters, splitting into factions determined to annihilate each other. In the midst of that chaos, Veda appeared, without warning, without origin, a necromancer. Though usually treated as a branch of black magic, Veda stood apart. He healed those afflicted by dark spells, restored the wounded, and on the battlefield he hunted dark mages relentlessly. Many allies felt uneasy fighting beside someone who commanded the dead, yet Veda earned reverence. He only raised those who willingly chose to serve after death. His undead were said to possess strength far beyond ordinary risen soldiers. Thanks to his presence, the world's view of necromancers changed. Under his power, the dark mages and demons fell. But when the war ended, Veda rejected countless rewards and honors, then disappeared as abruptly as he had arrived. Back in the present, Rion smirked, knowing he made the right choice showing Kornak. Knights who knew Veda's legend would be impressed. Sentin Rose too performed far better than expected, showing clear leadership even in sudden crisis. He resolved that one day he must return to Drea, saving someone he normally would have ignored. That choice alone tied him deeper into everything that awaited him next. He concluded it wasn't charity but an investment in Ryun's reputation, one Ryun had already lost. He looked at the poster of himself as Ryun, deciding that because of this incident, Leon would gain fame instead. He shifted his thoughts to House Rose. Though insignificant for now, its next head, Sentin Rose, held clear potential. He left a final remark, saying he looked forward to their next meeting. Night wind swept across the frozen path. His steps passed over scattered bones until he paused on a cliff, letting out a quiet breath. He wondered if half a day had passed since he crossed Daesong village, then noted he had finally reached his destination. A vast crater glowed beneath him, blue light drifting upward. It marked the starting point of the dark zone, its 12th level. Ryun wonders how far he has come down. He thinks he must be at a depth where sunlight can't reach anymore. For some reason, there is still light here, but the darkness feels thick enough to swallow it. He thinks that sometimes monsters they can't handle burst out from within. He recalls that humans constantly defended the Drea continent, and sermons studied the dark zone at the front line. This place was a dungeon going underground, a tall tower, and a vast sea all at once. It made people wander like an incoherent maze, so the Drea continent divided its boundaries. Floors 1 to 6 were assumed to exist but were never discovered. Floors 7 to 12 were found and even explored. The higher the floor number, the closer it is to the outside and the weaker the monsters. On the 12th floor there are goblins, mutated beasts, even orcs. He thinks it was a good thing he studied this place back when he was in the Sermon family. He believes it is the best place to level up, rather than hunting monsters scattered around the Drea continent. A place where they live densely packed is much more ideal for a player. For him, it is the perfect hunting ground. In the dark zone, compasses and maps don't work. The only way to navigate is through mana. His experience increases. Ryun thinks that the 12th floor is basically a beginner hunting ground. He knows people rarely come here, and because of the maze-like layout, meeting others is uncommon. He thinks this means he can freely test out power he never had the chance to use before. He prepares the necromancer abilities he had held back from using outside. He uses the skill to raise the dead. Undead monsters rise, and he judges that even if it is just a bottom-tier zombie made from a goblin, as long as it works as a meat shield, it is enough. Death's hand activates. The undead he raised becomes stronger, and its duration increases. He thinks that a place filled with monster corpses is perfect for using Death's hand. He says that it is good, and wonders if he should relieve some stress. The undead rush forward, and monsters scream as they are torn apart. On the 12th floor there is really no threat. The number of undead has grown to about 30 bodies. Ryun makes the undead fall. He watches the green light fade and thinks about his limit. He wonders if 30 or so is really all he can control. He remembers that in his prime, he controlled tens of thousands. He thinks that undead are like puppets on strings. He has to control each one, and they constantly drain mana. His mental strength is fine thanks to experience, but his lack of mana is the biggest problem. He came to the Dark Zone partly to level up and gain experience, but he also needs to replenish his lacking mana. To do that, he needs the Floor Guardian. In Adion, it is called a boss monster. He decides he has to hunt that thing. He breathes out, tired, and thinks about how many goblins and orcs he has killed. It feels like a few hundred at least. Death's hand skill level increases. He thinks this is endless, and notes that, even in Adion, there are not many hunting grounds with monster density like this. But in Dark Zone, it feels like dozens of dungeons mashed together, spitting out monsters. Ryun stands near a monster and thinks about regen. In Drea, they called it regeneration. He thinks that monsters in the Dark Zone do not disappear when they die. They revive after some time. On the Drea continent, some monsters form colonies or interact with humans and are treated as other races. But Dark Zone monsters exist only for slaughter, true perfect monsters. He decides there is no need to think too deeply about it, and focuses on his mana stat. Mana increases by 3. He plans to strengthen his skills, and then another one as well. The Raise Dead skill rank increases. Raise Dead sub-skills improve. Raise Zombie, Raise Skeleton, and Raise Skeleton Archer appear. He feels he has done everything he can through leveling. Now he needs to grow beyond the system. A message appears that Kornak has found a bone she likes. He reacts and looks over. A message appears about obtaining the goblin shaman's finger bone. Mana increases by 1. He realizes it is a growing undead. He thinks that instead of raising dozens of undead, creating an undead like Kornak is more profitable. But special undead like Kornak are rare, and Aiden could not create them either. Ryun thinks he has roughly figured out the trick, but whether he can make another is uncertain. He thinks that Dark Zone monsters have no souls, but before coming here he picked up a useful corpse. He plans to hand Garuta An's corpse to the guild, but not the others. He uses the subspace skill. He is glad he stored them in the corpse vault. He asks if he should begin the experiment. If it succeeds, it will be soul extraction. He thinks it will become a force capable of fighting the Floor Guardian. The Floor Guardian of the 12th floor is already well known. It appears in the weakest part of the Dark Zone, and stories spread widely among those who challenge or explore this place. A special orc appears. In Sermon, it is called the Human Slayer. Ryun watches, but seeing it in person feels different. A message appears, Orc Giant Berserker, level 23, the Slayer. He thinks it really is a monster. The orc releases a strong presence. A message appears that he has been exposed to orc fear, and his stats temporarily decrease. Another message says he successfully resisted using the Blue Earth circulation method. He says he came fully prepared to face it. He thinks the 12th floor's environment is closer to ruins or a maze. In a place like this, what is needed is mobility. He moves with energy around him. A zombie wolf, raised after killing and reanimating the orc chieftain's mount, charges forward. It will disappear once the mana infusion ends, but it is more than enough time to deal with the human slayer. The orc reacts in confusion as the wolf rushes forward. Ryun rides the wolf along the wall. He thinks it is no wonder that even in Sermon it takes a party of knights and mages to hunt it. He realizes the traces he scattered everywhere only made it more agitated. The more excited it gets, the more unavoidable it becomes. Openings appear. He attacks, but the cut is too shallow. He thinks it must be because his level as an assassin is still low. He uses a skill, Wound Aggravation. The wounds tear open wider and the orc screams. Dark energy spreads over the orc's body. He watches and says it is a curse-type skill. He tells it to stop struggling and die. The orc roars, and its body swells with purple rage. Ryun recognizes it as Berserk, a skill that blocks pain and pours out tremendous power. He sees that fighting it head-on will not work. He decides to fake being dead. He lowers his body and begins casting. Green magic circles spread beneath him. Summoned undead crawl up from the ground and swarm forward. The enraged orc growls and thrashes as they surround it. Ryun thinks that now it finally feels like a raid. He remembers the last experiment, when he used the corpses of Ani's group. He failed to create a special undead like Kornak, but he found another way to grow. He raises more magic. Dark energy forms between his hands. He casts Undead Enhancement. The undead glow and strengthen, and the swarm presses harder toward the orc. Soul sacrifice begins. Light gathers above the swarm of undead. A message appears that a knight's soul was used. The undead are strengthened through the soul sacrifice. Another message says the knight's abilities can be used temporarily. More power gathers. A message appears that a mage's soul was used. Through the soul sacrifice, Kornak's abilities are permanently strengthened. Another message says Kornak has awakened part of the knowledge he had while alive. Ryun calls Kornak. He says it is time to command. He orders the finish. The undead rush the human slayer. Blows land again and again. Poison bursts out when undead die. He notes that it even used a skill that spews deadly poison when undead die. He thinks the human slayer is holding out pretty well. He activates Commander's Eye. Ryun thinks that, thanks to the knight's soul, they fought better than expected, but undead are consumables in the end. He thinks they are shields meant to break. Poison spreads over the human slayer. He watches and waits. The moment its berserk weakens because of the poison, he calls Kornak. Kornak moves. The human slayer roars as the undead explode and tear into it. Magic gathers. Bright circles rise. Fire spreads like a storm. The human slayer looks up at the burning sky and screams. Ryun casts Firebolt and follows it with the command to hit everything. Flames gather and spiral, then crash down in a blazing column. The human slayer is engulfed as explosions tear into the ground and fire pours over its body. The human slayer roars while burning, staggers forward through the flames, then coughs and struggles to stay standing. Ryun stands with the undead behind him and acknowledges that the human slayer is, as expected, worthy of guarding a lair. He cancels the summon. Green magic circles fade as the undead dissolve. Kornak watches calmly as the human slayer lets out a low growl. Ryun acknowledges that the human slayer's tenacity truly lives up to its name, but states that this is his victory. He activates Hand of Death. After days of experimentation, Hand of Death has ranked up, and as a result, a new ability has been unlocked. He activates Life Drain. Notifications appear stating that he absorbed 3 horsepowers and 1 mana from the human slayer, then that he has reached the maximum absorbable amount at his current level. The human slayer stiffens as dark energy spreads through its body. A notification appears stating that he has hunted the human slayer. Another states that because this is his first time hunting the human slayer, a bonus EXP is awarded. Another states that his level has increased. A notification states that with Phantom's ability, he may extract the human slayer's soul. With a 57% success rate, Ryun realizes he can extract the soul of a named boss monster. He recalls thinking monsters in the Dark Zone had no souls and concludes that layer guardians are different. He notes the 57% chance and decides there is no way he is passing on this opportunity. He activates soul extraction. Dark energy pulls at the human slayer's form. A notification appears stating that soul extraction from the human slayer succeeded. Ryun reacts as the extracted soul stabilizes. Ryun finds it strange that the clarity is gone. He wonders why the body has not disappeared, and thinks it should vanish upon death and then regenerate. He asks himself if this means he can face the next challenger. He considers that if this is like the Knight's Guardian, the Dark Zone will notice. Elsewhere, a group moves through the area and is told to go this way. They arrive at a damaged site. One of them realizes these are definitely traces of a battle and says the report was that the human slayer was killed here. Another adds that the number mobilized was at least 30, including well-trained elites such as mages. A woman questions whether that is even possible. A knight agrees it is strange and notes that among those registered to enter the Dark Zone, there were no groups of adventurers or trainees large enough for this. It is also pointed out that the attack patterns are not random and look like the work of someone experienced in hunting. They conclude it was a human. Women states with certainty that the human slayer has been hunted. It is said that with the layer guardian gone, the monsters of the 12th layer will rampage and attempt to break past the boundary. An order is given that all forces are to be committed to prevent layer escape. Someone asks who in the world could have done it, noting that with Sermon's strategy weakening them, even knights and mages struggle. Man asks Jang what troubles him so much. Jang answers that it is nothing at all and says they should clean up and return quickly, adding that his arm is still unstable since the last mission, and he should not overdo it. He thinks this is not just the trace of a hunt but a signal left behind, and that the time has come for him to carry out the mission entrusted to him. Elsewhere, a blue light glows in the darkness. Ryun assumes that is the exit and realizes this is now the 11th layer. He looks down at a land of lakes and swamps and notes it is definitely different from the frontline 12th layer. He thinks it should be fine here. He activates the skill morgue. Purple energy surges as a corpse rises before him. He notes that normally the human slayer should vanish upon being hunted and then regenerate, but for some reason its corpse remains and is now in his possession. He senses another problem as a quest window opens. The quest paths listed are Path of Vengeance, Path of the Assassin, Path of the Necromancer, and Path of the Soul. He states that the number of quests has increased. Ryun recalls that the first opened after he defeated Ake, and that the second opened when he entered Martin. He sees that the Path of the Necromancer was unlocked after hunting the human slayer and decides to check the details. System notice appears stating that the Path of the Necromancer and the Path of the Soul are merged into a single quest. Ryun reacts and tells it to hold on. The quest interface scrolls as the main quest is announced. A notice states that Veda's legacy begins. Ryun reacts to the word main. A notice states that the Path of Revenge is converted into a main quest. Another notice states that the Path of the Assassin is converted into a job quest. Another states that a sub-quest is opened for the Path of Revenge. A new objective appears to rebuild the Sermon family. Another notice states that a clear objective is given to the Path of the Assassin. The Path of the Assassin objective appears as obtaining Martin's 4th rank assassin qualification. Ryun thinks that the system has grown, and notes that the system that was almost useless in Drea has started working like it did in Adeon. He wonders why only now. A world quest notice appears stating that Veda's legacy begins. The objective appears as raising the human slayer as an undead. Ryun questions whether such a coincidence can really happen. He wonders what connection exists between the human slayer and Veda. Ryun notes that it is also a world quest, and recalls that killing a god in Adeon was the only world quest he had ever received. To resolve his doubts, he decides he has no choice but to complete the quest, and raises his hand as a magic circle forms. The command to raise the dead activates, and green and purple energy pours into the corpse. The body reacts as the energy twists and condenses, but something feels wrong. Ryun reacts in confusion as the mana flow surges. The energy violently drains his mana, forcing him to grit his teeth as it continues uncontrollably. A vortex of dark power expands, and a massive armored undead form emerges from within it. The undead completes its manifestation, radiating overwhelming pressure. Ryun recognizes it as a skeleton berserker, and admits that he had expected an undead on Kornak's level instead. A notice appears stating that he has succeeded in Veda's legacy by raising the human slayer. Another notice states that a new quest begins, with the objective to complete the human slayer. Another notice states that a hero's soul is required to complete the human slayer. Ryun reacts in silence, then notes that it absorbed that much mana and is still incomplete. He looks at the human slayer while holding a golden system window and comments on its terrible efficiency. The surroundings shift to a forest as monsters scream and charge. Beasts roar and rush forward. The skeleton berserker charges into them, swinging its weapon and cutting through the monsters. Ryun notes that even if it is incomplete, it is still quite useful against normal monsters. He observes that the disappointing part is the mana consumption, as expected. He notes that the skeleton berserker is a special type entity, and that it does not disappear and can be stored in the corpse vault, but with limitations. But the problem is that it needs a constant supply of mana, and that with this condition, raising other undead would be impossible. He states that he still found a way to use it properly, with Kornak handling long-range attacks and the skeleton berserker acting as a tank and warrior in close combat. Using the two together to clear floors reminds him of hunting in parties back in Aeon. A notice appears stating that Death Hand's level has increased. Another notice states that his mana has increased by 3. Ryun says he cannot focus only on hunting and recalls the other reason he came here. He activates the blue earth tempering method. Green energy spreads outward in a wide pattern, scanning the surroundings. The area grows quiet as the effect fades. He concludes that it really is not here. According to the Asan family's information, this dark zone is where his brothers were seen. He keeps activating the blue earth tempering method to look for resonance, but finds none. He says he cannot feel any resonance from his brothers and wonders where they are. He recalls that the Asan family's intel said they went deeper, to the 9th floor, and considers that this may be natural. He thinks that the problem is whether his current strength can handle the 10th floor or higher. The blue earth tempering method reacts. He is startled and realizes it is resonating. He understands that someone who learned the Sermon family's tempering method is within detection range. He senses 2 people approaching. He determines that one of them is neither a knight nor a mage. He notes that if they were knights or mages, they would not dare leave footprints in the dark zone. He observes that the other moves like someone trained, and is wearing equipment, with one distinctive feature, only one arm. He wonders if they are truly from the Sermon family, and considers whether he should reveal himself. He decides he wants to avoid returning to his original appearance for now. Before he can act, someone suddenly appears behind him and comments that he has become so cute they almost did not recognize him. He reacts in shock and calls out a name. Realizing it is Sena, another voice greets him respectfully, addressing him as young master. He recognizes the speaker as Chief Steward Truno and also notices Jang standing with him. Truno says it has been a long time and explains that if he had not used the tempering method, they might not have recognized him. He adds that they hurried here after seeing the traces he left behind, and that while following those traces, they detected the activation of the blue earth tempering method. Truno explains that, as instructed, Jang was told to guard this place and treat any unprecedented anomaly in the dark zone as a signal announcing Ryun's appearance. Jang adds that it is a great honor to be entrusted with such an important role. A sound stirs in the forest. A presence emerges behind Ryun. A woman stands there, calm and composed, and tells him that he is safe. She says it has been a long time. Ryun lowers his gaze and addresses her as his mother. A memory surfaces of her always being away from the family, running from place to place. He recalls that back then, he did not know all her efforts were for Sermon and for herself. He remembers that he had seen her face only a few times in his life, and that he had resented her deeply. She calls his name and tells him that he is of the Sermon bloodline, and that now he understands. He understands that she struggled desperately because she could not afford to lose even the last one left child she had. A barrier spreads outward. Sena says she has set up a barrier. Ryun's mother thanks her and says they can now talk comfortably. Ryun calls out to Jang and mentions his arm. Jang explains that it is an injury he suffered when the Patton family attacked the young master's carriage. He adds that because of this injury, he was entrusted with the important duty of protecting the chief operator Truno, who is hiding there. Truno explains that since he is officially considered dead to the world, with Sena's help he set up a temporary shelter in the dark zone and went into hiding. Sena says it is the perfect place to work behind the scenes while avoiding the Patton family's eyes. It is said by Ryun's mother that such true, heartfelt loyalty to the Saren family, and the trust the family head has without those ties, would not have been possible otherwise. Ryun is told that he has captured their hearts splendidly, which makes him blush. Ryun's mother says she heard that Ryun planned all of this, and now, as the mother of the Saren family's young master, she cannot help but ask him who took young Patton's finger and handed son's Patton over to Sena. Ryun admits that it was all his plan. She stated that with the evidence that his son's Peyton, they were able to force mediation from the Patton family, and even receive massive compensation. Having had their child kidnapped, the Patton family had no choice but to swallow their rage. Ryun's mother says that he is the one who brought about that result, then asks if he is truly her son, Ryun. Ryun answers that he is her son and states that he is Ryun's Sermin. He thinks that he may not be the Ryun she once knew, but that he is indeed the son born from her womb. Ryun's mother thanks the goddess. She says she will ask just one more thing. She asks why she senses the aura of death from him. Ryun reacts in shock as the words "the aura of death" echo. Ryun thinks that she must have detected the aura of a necromancer from him, and adds that he is a swordmaster, and at the same time a paladin. He understands that against her as a holy knight, half-hearted excuses will not work. When Son's Peyton kidnapped him, It became the signal flare for his plan. It was not just her but also Sena and even Jiang. All of them were indispensable in carrying out that plan. At the very least, he needs to make her understand his change, so that she will act under his plan without making reckless moves. He tells her that he will tell her everything, beginning with a dream he once had. His mother quietly asks what kind of dream it was. Ryun says that more precisely, it could be called a revelation. He begins explaining that the dream was a vision of the fall of the Sermon family. He tells her the dream is a future where the Feton family burned their lands, the Daeron kingdom and the noble houses abandoned them, and Feton's forces killed Colin and many of their people. The conflict with the Feton family had grown further in reality. It was something that truly could have happened. Ryun explains that he was captured by Feton, and that his mother and his younger sister Maria were also taken prisoner by the Feton family. Sena and Alejandro struggled desperately to save them. Sena pushed her abilities beyond her limits and Alejandro was pierced all over by arrows. In the end, right before Ryun's eyes, they were brutally killed by their enemies. He says that he suffered years of harsh torture and experiments at the Feton family's hands, and before finally dying, that was the dream. He says that through it, he realized who he was, what he had to do, and what he was capable of. His mother asks if that is true, and whether that dream became the trigger for all these events. Ryun answers yes and declares that he is a sermon. Truno thinks that if anyone else had said this, it would have sounded like complete nonsense. But considering what Sons Feton actually did, it cannot be dismissed as absurd. Sena wonders if it was a divine revelation, or if he could be said to have been shown the future. Ryun's mother considers that it may be a power passed down through the sermon bloodline, or that this child had been moving behind the scenes to prevent that dream from becoming reality, and that he obtained the power to make that possible. Otherwise, she says, he could never have taken Feton's finger or faced the dark zone. She pauses and asks what his plans are from here on. Ryun asks if she truly believes him, questioning whether she would believe a story like this from a child. She answers that he is not a child, but someone making and carrying out a decision for the future of the Sermon family, and that she and everyone there will support him with all they have. Ryun accepts and says there is no turning back now, then states that there is something she, as his mother, can never allow. When she tells him to say it, Ryun declares that she must give up the name of a prestigious family. His mother reacts in shock as the weight of those words sinks in. Truno reacts in disbelief and asks if he is saying to give it up. He urgently calls out to the young master and says that if they do, the Sermon family will be reduced to an ordinary house and lose its status as a prestigious family. Ryun calmly says that he knows. Ryun adds that regaining that title would be impossible for the current Sermon family. Sena explains that a prestigious family is authority backed by real power, one that can stand above nations and decide the fate of the world when humanity faces catastrophe. Ryun's mother also said that such a family holds representative authority in matters involving other dimensions beyond Rhea. She asks if he is telling them to abandon that name. Ryun answers that they must and states that Feton will start a war. He explains that Feton knows the Sermon family's current condition better than anyone, and will see this as a gamble worth taking to become the greatest prestigious family. He asks what will happen to Sermon if war breaks out, and whether they can win. Ryun explains that once a conflict between prestigious families begins, even kingdoms cannot intervene. He says that right now, without a kingdom backing them, they will lose without being able to do anything. So they must abandon the name of a prestigious family and take shelter under a kingdom's name, seeking the protection of the continent's order and laws, and that for this, his mother's decision is necessary. Ryun's mother asks if he is serious. Ryun steps forward and says this is not running away or giving up, but a tactical retreat and a clever move to lure the enemy into a trap. He urges her to think about it but not to take too long. He then says there is one more thing and tells her that she must bring his younger sister Maria back quickly. Sena reacts and asks if, with Sermon in turmoil, he truly intends to bring the young lady back to the family, saying that Maria is her mother's only hope. Ryun responds that they already placed some expectations on what Maria can do, but rather, this is what will truly be for Maria's sake, and the way to draw out what Maria desires. He asks for her understanding, saying this is all he can say for now. After a moment of silence, Ryun's mother answers that it is very well. She declares that they will relinquish the prestigious family title and bring Maria back. She places a hand over her chest and says that she should have done this long ago. Ryun thinks that this is the right choice, and that it will allow them to avoid unnecessary sacrifices. She reflects and says that it seems she is not fit to lead the Sermon family. Ryun reacts in surprise. In response, she calls his name and states that before she is a holy knight and the family head, she is his mother. She says that what he said means he must take responsibility for Sermon. As the family head currently leading Sermon, she declares that she will test whether he is qualified to bear that responsibility and tells him to endure one strike from her. Those watching react, realizing that this is the blade of a holy knight, who is both a swordmaster and a paladin, and they call out to the family head. Ryun understands that he is the only one directly suitable for the irreplaceable position of family head. His mother knew it as well, that his father and his brothers are already as good as dead. That is why, even unofficially, she intends to hand over the position of family head here. She declares that if he withstands her strike, she will follow his words, and that she will take responsibility for persuading the elders in the family, along with all consequences that follow. A system message appears stating that a quest has been triggered. Ryun focuses, his eyes steady, as the quest titled Ryun's Mother, or say Celine's recognition, is revealed. Celine raises her sword, and Ryun tells his mother that he does not wish for her to bear that responsibility. Ryun tightens his grip as power gathers, deciding that if this is the only way, then he has no choice but to do it. Ryun identifies his mother as Celine, known to the world as the Silver Dragon. Celine is a swordmaster and a paladin, but she cannot wield both powers at the same time. If Celine tests him with the power of a swordmaster, it will be mana, and if she uses the power of a paladin, it will be divine power, so Ryun must change his response according to that power. Ryun sees it, Celine moves in an instant, and Ryun realizes it is too fast. The strike comes down, and Ryun cannot block it or dodge it either, leaving him stunned as he wonders what that was. Ryun realizes he could avoid it because Celine's power was mana, using the skill Spirit Form that draws on the power of a ghost, a basic ghost skill he used for over 100 years in Aedeon, but his body is still not perfect for it. Celine calls out his name as he is struck, and Ryun understands that his body cannot fully handle it yet. Others rush in and ask if he is alright, while a prayer is offered to Goddess Aldisil for the wound. Ryun says he is fine and decides to take the wound as a mark he will never forget of his mother's love and concern, and of the fact that he is her son. Celine softly calls Ryun's name, and he thanks her for trusting him as she holds him close. System tells that Ryun has received Celine's recognition and gained a small amount of experience along with it. Another states that he avoided the Swordmaster's strike with Spirit Form, and that Spirit Form's skill rank has increased. Another follows, stating that Phantom's level has increased. As they sit together, Ryun thinks that there are still things he must do on his own. He presents a written document declaring the timing to relinquish the prestigious family status. He tells about the things that must be done next, and the things that must be done after that. Celine looks at the document and says it is a shame that she can only be by his side for now. Sena addresses him as young master, and says that Colin and Alejandro are very worried about him, especially since Alejandro does not yet know the full situation. He decides that it would be best not to tell Alejandro for now, since he shows his feelings too clearly. Ryun says he will go see Colin himself. Truno said that even if Alejandro finds out later, he will not resent them, because Knight Commander Alejandro is that kind of person. They part ways, and Celine walks off with the others while Ryun turns and leaves alone. Ryun walks down the forest path, putting distance between himself and them as the road stretches ahead. He moves toward Daron Kingdom, in the Martin Information Branch, as Ryun stops in front of the building. Inside, a woman greets him and welcomes him as the 5th-rank assassin lord, Leon, and tells him that there is a letter from the Patent Branch, as Ryun didn't reveal himself and his true identity in front of everyone, so everybody treats him as Leon, an assassin. Ryun reaches out and takes the sealed letter, his expression tightening as he grips it. Ryun enters a village tavern while people sit at tables drinking and talking. He reads the letter and notes that, as expected, it is about the 4th-to-rank promotion test, including the promotion test and mission instructions. A system message appears stating that a quest has been triggered, followed by another indicating the 4th-to-rank promotion test. The quest details state that the task is to assassinate the Mage Goma in the Daron Kingdom's territory of Kaled. Ryun recalls having heard of the Mage Goma and considers him a fitting target for a 4th-rank test that measures combat ability. According to the information, Goma appeared in Kaled one day and created a dungeon. After that, villagers began disappearing one by one, and even the mercenaries and adventurers hired with the villagers' pooled money went missing. When reports to the Lord led to no proper investigation, the villagers finally made a request to a more special place, Martin. Ryun decides there is no need to overthink it, and that he has 2 things to do now: clear the dungeon and assassinate Goma. He arrives in Kaled and walks through the village streets as dust drifts through the air. A villager stops him and asks if he is an outsider, warning that he looks young and should leave the village. Ryun responds that he has just arrived and is already being told to leave. The villager adds that she does not know why Ryun came to such a small village, but the warning remains. She states that a fog of death has settled over the place. It is revealed that all males, both adults and children, are disappearing. Ryun listens in silence, his expression tightening as he processes the words. He reacts to the information, focusing on the fact that only males are vanishing. The old woman points to the mountainside and asks if Ryun can see it. She explains that the mage settled there is devouring men to gain mana. She tells Ryun that if he doesn't want to die too, he should leave the village. A girl calls out to her mother. Ryun asks the girl what is happening in the village. She replies that this old woman lost her son and isn't in her right mind, so he shouldn't pay attention to her. The girl asks if Ryun came from outside and points out an inn, saying the food is decent and it's a good place to stay. Ryun thinks that her attitude is completely different from the old woman's, almost as if she wants him not to leave. The old woman keeps telling him to leave, warning that he will die if he stays, and that the mage will devour him. The girl begs her to stop. The girl catches the old woman and goes inside the house. She then closes the door, followed by a loud impact. Ryun remembers the warning which states that there are rumors this is a ploy to lure outsiders, and that they offer mercenaries or adventurers instead of village men to the mages. Ryun decides that for now he should go to the inn and feels he shouldn't rush to hunt Goma right away. Ryun walks toward a building. It is stated that in any assassination, relying only on given information is something you must never do. Ryun says there are people he needs to meet. Two cloaked figures stand on a rooftop under the moon, whereas inside the inn, a girl asks if he means Granny Sarman. She says that Granny Sarman is a poor old woman who lost both of her sons. She stated that the disappearance of the village's men is real. Then she says that this includes travelers and mercenaries who came here. The girl tells him that he should be careful too. Ryun asks about the Lord and whether with so many people disappearing, the Lord just sat still. The girl says the Lord sent his soldiers to investigate, but they found nothing. She adds that it will be dealt with soon, and that the villagers pooled their money and hired a fixer. Ryun asks what a fixer is. The girl explains that it is the assassin guild belonging to the Asan family, and names Martin. She says that if it is them, they will definitely solve it. Ryun thinks that it was the villagers, not the Lord, who made the request. The girl says that it cost quite a lot of money too. Ryun responds that he understands. The girl says it is not really something an innkeeper should say, but it would be better not to stay in this village too long. Ryun agrees. Footsteps are heard as a group enters. Ryun notices mercenaries and thinks they are a party that even includes a mage. A man tells the innkeeper to bring them some food to fill their stomachs. He complains that they had to come all the way to a backwater village like this. One of them calls Bayak and asks if they are supposed to meet the client here. Bayak confirms it. Ryun notices a silver badge on their chest and thinks that being silver rank means they are pretty skilled. A door opens, and a red-haired woman in a cloak enters. Bayak asks if she is the client. The reply is absolutely no. The hooded girl asks if she can sit there. She sits down and introduces herself as Ravina. Ryun thinks he never said Ravina could sit. Ravina asks if her name is Leon, which makes Ryun react. Ryun thinks about the letter, which states that since there is a high chance the target is hiding in the dungeon, they will send an assistant for the dungeon raid named Sapphire. Ryun reacts, wondering why they sent a guide instead of an assassin as support, and complains about his name being called so carelessly in an open place. Ravina says it is an honor, and that she is happy to meet the talent everyone at the Martin branch has been talking about lately. Ryun gestures for Ravina to be quiet. Ravina apologizes and says it is her first time seeing a real Assassin Guild member, but Ryun tells her to be quiet. A person asks why the client is taking so long. Bayek says they will come soon and tells him to have patience. He adds that they even gave up a troll hunt to come, so it better be worth it. The bearded man says it is their first dungeon, a chance to make the Steel Shield Mercenary Company famous, and that if it goes well, they might even get a promotion. Ryun thinks that it looks like they did not hear them over there. Ravina says they are just rookies. Ravina says they do not even know how terrifying that dungeon is. She judges by their gear that none of them seem specialized in trap disarming or navigation. Mage sits with her arms crossed, and Ravina points out that it is obvious they are relying on the mage. She adds that this is why adventurers are no good and that they think a mage can handle everything. Ravina turns with a confident expression and begins to speak about how professionals like them are different. Ryun stands beside her and watches. Footsteps sound as someone approaches across the wooden floor. The same elderly woman steps forward and asks whether they are the Steel Shield Mercenary Company. She introduces herself as the client named Sarman. Ryun recognizes her as the old woman from the village entrance. A sack of coins is poured onto the table, and gold scatters across the surface. Sarman explains that this reward is everything she owns. She asks them to defeat the mage on the mountainside and at least bring back her son's body. Tears run down her face as she reaches out and says that she wants to bury him in a sunny place. The group reacts in silence. The bearded man clears his throat to acknowledge her request. He assures her that failure does not exist for the Steel Shield, and that they will complete the request, without fail. The bearded man hesitates, and brings up that the reward seems a little low for the risk involved. Ravina comments that it is a ripoff. Sarman admits it and pulls out a ring. She explains that it is a family heirloom, and that she meant to leave it to her daughter-in-law, but offers it if they bring back her son's body. Ryun watches in silence as the ring is shown. The system reports that the Quest Veda's legacy has been updated. It displays a map containing the location of the hero's soul. Ravina notices something is wrong as the sudden change draws attention. Ryun senses it as well. The bearded man reacts sharply when another ring is offered and stops the hand, stating that this is enough. Bae calls out to him to wait, but the bearded man turns and orders the Steel Shield Mercenary Company to move out. He studies the glowing ring in his hand with interest, and notes that finding something like this in a backwater is an unexpected windfall. Ryun looks over with a questioning expression while Ravina stands behind him, puzzled by the sudden turn of events. Scene shifts and we see moonlight falls over the rocky mountainside as wind moves through the trees. The bearded man asks about the appraisal result. Mage examines the ring within a glowing magic circle and confirms that it is definitely a magic item, though she does not yet know what kind of item it is. She adds that it is beyond what she can currently identify. The ring reacts and releases a vivid surge of light. The bearded man remarks that it is worth looking forward to, and comments that for killing a nobody mage in a rural village, this is extremely satisfying pay. He reflects on how unexpected it is to obtain such a treasure. Mage points out that since it is a dungeon, they might find other magic items as well, and notes that even a low-level mage would have something if he built a dungeon. The bearded man agrees to move quickly, and urges the group to finish the job without delay. Ryun watches the group from the forest path as they move ahead under the moonlight. He notes that no matter how confident someone is in their skills, charging in without proper intel gathering shows a lack of the basics. Ravina appears beside him and remarks that their faces show they are lacking the basics. Ryun thinks that this applies to her as well. Being more of a supervisor than a helper, he reflects that he could not just leave them alone and followed them. Ravina points that even though they are poorly prepared, and that a rural dungeon like this would not be a problem, Ryun warns her not to get overconfident, and Ravina points out that his sudden move to tail them is because of the magic item they received. She remarks that this means he is not just an ordinary helper, then suggests that if that is the case, he might as well kill them all and take it. Ryun stiffens at the suggestion. He states that an assassin is not a bandit, and adds that taking everything just because one wants it makes someone a robber. The scene shifts. The group reaches a cave entrance carved into the rock, where a blue glow flows out from within. A wave of mana surges from the entrance and spreads outward through the trees. Footsteps move forward as they step onto the path leading inside. The flow of mana gathers and swirls around the entrance, surrounding Ryun and Ravina as they too reach there. Before some moments, Ryun and Ravina reaches at the entrance before the group. Ravina states that it is a dungeon. Ryun snaps at her to stop talking so much, and asks whether she even knows what tailing someone means. She begins to explain, then brings up the noise suppression ring she gave him before they left. Ryun looks down at the ring in his hand and reacts. Ryun explains that he did not get it from her and that the guild gave it to him. She adds that even so, tailing people becomes less boring with it. She cheerfully praises him as a promising talent who received a designated request and is on the path to becoming a full guild member. She points out that Ryun assassinated Garuta Ani. The fallen Rose family makes a designated request to Martin with an enormous amount of money. Ryun asks how enormous they are talking about. Ravina answers that she heard it was 100% gold. Ryun is shocked at the amount. Ryun wonders whether they put the entire payment into Martin. It was supposed to be paid separately, not given entirely to Martin. Ryun starts to calculate how much would be left after fees, then stops himself. He reasons that even as a failing family, they would not foolishly throw away that much money. He concludes that this was likely done to make it a big topic, so that the news would definitely reach him. He questions whether it was a plan to force him to come and find her just to complain. Ravina begins to comment that for someone around her age, that is impressive, but Ryun cuts her off and tells her to be quiet. While in present, they look toward the cave entrance glowing in the distance. Ryun repeats that it is a dungeon. Mana continues to surge at the entrance. Ryun notes that those mercenaries went in without even checking their surroundings. He states that there is only one option anyway. Ravina reacts, questioning what option he means. Ravina asks what is wrong as she notices Ryun's expression change. Ryun wonders that he followed the promotion test and the quest, and then, by coincidence, a map containing the hero's soul appeared. On top of that, the Lord is neglecting the disappearance of his people, who are practically his property. Ryun concludes that it is too lucky to call it a coincidence. Because of that, he ended up following them, even though it was not part of his original plan, leaving other options behind. The appearance of a map with the hero's soul means a quest of that level of difficulty. He adds that it was not just good luck and that this is how the system works. He thinks that it is probably starting to resemble the Adian system more now. He notes that even without this system, there is clearly some secret in this village. Mana surges at the dungeon entrance as the two of them stand before it. Suddenly, screams from the mercenaries echo from within the dungeon. Ryun turns his head sharply toward the sound. The sound of weapons clashing rings out from within the dungeon. An explosion erupts deeper inside, and the shockwave flashes through the entrance. Ryun watches the blast and questions whether the mage inside caused it. Ravina and Ryun move forward as the noise fades. Ravina notes that the sounds have stopped. He asks how long it has been since they went in. Ravina estimates that it has been about 30 minutes. Ryun remarks that a silver-ranked mercenary company being wiped out in 30 minutes is unlikely. He adds that they probably gained their rank thanks to that mage, but this also means that even such a mage could not last 30 minutes in this dungeon. Ryun decides that they should go in right now. Ravina reacts in surprise. Ryun explains that if they go in now, at least up to where the mercenaries reached, the traps will not trigger again. He adds that they can examine the traps that already went off, and that understanding the nature of the traps will give them more ways to deal with them. Ravina watches him with interest, and remarks that this is impressive. Ryun steps forward, and his foot presses against the ground as green mana begins to gather around his hand. Ravina notices the movement and urgently stops him. He reacts in confusion, questioning why. Ravina reminds him that he just said the traps would not trigger again for a while. Ryun clarifies that this would be true if they were only traps. Green energy spreads across the ground as a magic formation activates beneath his hand. He explains that if he had not activated the blue earth tempering method, he would have ended up like the mercenaries. Multiple illusion formations rise around him, and the space distorts with layered magic circles. He identifies it as illusion magic circles. Ravina is startled and questions what illusion means, then asks what happened to the mercenaries. Ryun states that the trap started before they even entered the dungeon. A brief caption marks that this happened 20 minutes ago. Inside the dungeon, Bake struggles to breathe amid burning debris. The bearded man, or say the mercenary leader, shouts in anger, demanding to know if everyone has gone mad. Bake calls out to him as their boss. In present, Ryun explains that it is a troublesome type of magic circle that is easy to conceal until just before activation. He adds that it only distorts vision and does not deal physical damage, so even if someone is caught, they might not notice. He notes that a skilled mage could break it at activation, but those who stepped on it unknowingly were already affected. Ryun explains that people usually prioritize disabling physical traps and likely assume that even if there were a magic trap, a capable mage could stop it right after activation. There is a skill called Detect Trap that can scan for traps in advance, but someone with that level would not be in a party like this. Ravina concludes that this means the group was unprepared. Well before 20 minutes. Inside the dungeon, the mercenaries begin attacking one another in confusion. The leader strikes one of his own men, and another cries out in shock as he realizes the one attacking him is their boss. The mercenary leader charges forward, swinging his weapon and shouting for the monster to die. Another mercenary shouts that the magic item is his. Blood splashes across the ground as mercenaries cut at each other in the chaos. Bake cries out in panic, questioning how many monsters there are. He toward Mage and demands that she do something with her magic. Mage says that she needs time to analyze it, and then tries to drive them back with a small explosion for the moment. She calls for the others to cover her, as a dark creature reaches to her from behind. Flames burst out around the group as she releases her spell. The dark creature leaps through the fire and struck down the mage. Bake realizes something is wrong and tries to stop the advance, but the blast surges outward. The fire washes over the cave, forcing them back as the battle continues in confusion. Because of the illusion magic, they turned on one another and attacked each other inside the dungeon. In present, Ryun and Ravina step onto cracked stones stained with blood. Ryun examines the traces and states that this matches what he expected. He notes that they are badly wounded, but since he does not see their souls, they are not dead. He observes that someone dragged them further inside. He adds that there are no marks of armor being dragged, so only the mage was taken. He reasons that either she had a different purpose or she was useless to them. Ryun remarks that if only the mage's corpse were left behind, it could have served as a warning about the trap to the next group. He points out that the problem is the traces of those who dragged the mercenaries away. Ravina looks at the footprints as Ryun notes that they look like human footprints, but slightly different. Ryun recalls that the trap started before entering the dungeon. Ravina asks him to explain. According to the information, Goma did not appear in this village, and immediately build a dungeon to lock himself inside. Originally, an artificial dungeon made by a mage was used for research, training, or even secret inhumane experiments. Goma built a dungeon on the mountainside of Kaelad and lived there without major issues, maintaining fairly good relations with the villagers. When the village's men began to disappear, he was suspected as the culprit and shut himself inside the dungeon, never appearing again. Ryun points out the problem, noting the dungeon on the mountainside outside the village, the mage hiding inside, and the missing village men, and questions how all of these are connected. Ravina reacts with surprise and wonders whether Goma trained dungeon monsters to use for kidnapping. Ryun explains that to abduct adult men, the captors would need to be at least orc level in strength. He adds that if monsters were responsible, footprints would have revealed it long ago. He concludes that those carrying out the kidnappings are most likely human. He further reasons that it is natural to assume Goma has outside accomplices who can move freely in and out of the village and quietly subdue adult men without leaving traces. He adds that if they successfully abducted the first few and spread rumors that Goma inside the dungeon was the culprit, they could lure people into searching for the missing. He notes that the hired mercenaries and adventurers likely met their end like the Steel Shield group. Ravina praises him, but Ryun says this is only a hypothesis. Ravina asks why only men are being abducted. Ryun states that what Goma is plotting down there is still unknown. He signals that there is something to deal with before that, as green energy gathers around him and ghostly figures appear behind him. Green energy gathers around Ryun's raised hand as he activates a skill called Soul Search. Translucent green spirits surge forward from him and spread out into the dungeon. The Phantom skill releases souls to scout the area. Ryun observes that the dungeon is fairly deep and complex, with areas that cannot be detected. He identifies a section that is likely where Goma is plotting something. He notes that from this point on, the dungeon is filled with ordinary traps and that Goma likely did not expect anyone to get past this far. Ravina states that then it is her turn to step in. Ryun questions whether she is serious. He warns that the danger level has already surpassed A rank evaluation, and that if she goes any further, she might lose her life. Ryun tells her he can handle Goma, and suggests that she return to the village. Ryun wonders that no matter the difficulty, he cannot give up the promotion test, and that there is something bigger at stake for his plan. Ravina falls silent for a moment, then declares that she is going. She states that she is not an assassin but is still a member of Martin, and that running away from something like this would stain Martin's name. Ryun thinks that assassins are usually not very loyal to their guild and finds it unusual to see such passion from a support member. He wonders whether she has another motive. She clings to him and asks whether Leon would protect her if something happens. Ryun responds that he will, but tells her not to resent him if he fails. Ravina reacts in confusion at the remark. They move deeper into the dungeon. A man watches them through a crystal ball, his eyes glowing white as he sneers at them and curses the Martin Guild. The man watching through the crystal ball mutters in frustration, cursing the Martin Guild. He recalls that he was told a 5th-rank assassin would come and wonders if the information was wrong. He realizes that the traps that had never allowed any intruders until now are being neutralized by them. He adds that even Martin should not have been able to reach this far. The man states that the results he carefully cultivated in this backwater place will not be taken from him. He declares that they will become food for his ratman before reaching him. Inside a glass tank, a horned green creature stirs and opens its glowing eyes. Green fluid bubbles around the creature as it awakens. A surge of energy spirals through the passage. Ravina announces that she is done and states that she disabled the trap triggers in this area. She adds that they will not activate until the next corner. Ryun acknowledges her work and remarks that it is not bad. He reminds her that the dungeon does not only have physical traps. Ravina responds that she knows. She lifts a glowing stone and identifies it as a mana stone. Mana stone is an item that compresses mana and spells inside special ore, and notes that it is expensive and not easy to handle. Pink magical energy spreads across the floor as Ravina channels the stone to neutralize the traps. Ryun thinks that disarming magical traps is a high-level skill that requires quickly understanding the mana structure and cutting its flow, and notes that even relying on an item, that level of control is impressive. Ravina announces that she is done. Ryun gives a faint smile. Ryun tells her he will ask one last time and asks if she really does not plan to turn back. Ravina insists that she said she is coming with him, and adds that she is also scared of what might happen if she goes back alone. Ryun questions whether she is scared, and she reminds him that he said something strange dragged the mercenaries away. Ryun gives an example and points out that there is something behind her. A purple-eyed beast appears directly behind Ravina. She turns in confusion. The creature lunges and lets out a loud roar. Ryun steps forward and blocks the attack, standing between Ravina and the beast. Ravina peeks out from behind him and stammers that it is a rat, then cuts herself off in fear. Ravina recognizes the creature as a ratman. Ryun states that now the reason the village men were disappearing is clear. The man watching through the crystal ball lets out a low laugh. He mocks the Martin Guild and sneers at Ryun, saying that for a mere 5th rank, reaching this far is impressive, but questions whether he can break through his ratman pack. Ravina reacts in disbelief at the existence of ratmen, noting that they are artificial creatures that should have completely disappeared. She recalls that after the Black-White War, the Dark Mages were wiped out, and the method to create ratmen vanished as well. Ryun acknowledges that what he is seeing here contradicts that. A ratman lunges at Ryun. Green blades of energy strike out as he counters, cutting the creature down. Ryun recalls that he used to hunt these creatures to death over and over in Adion. He moves through the pack, cutting down the charging ratmen one after another. Ravina watches from behind as blood sprays and the ratmen fall under the sweeping arcs of green energy. Ryun dashes forward and slashes through the ratmen, his green blades cutting them down in quick succession as blood sprays across the passage. Ravina watches in awe and stammers that it is amazing, noting that even though it is his first time fighting ratmen, he handles them more easily than goblins. The man observing through the crystal ball grips it in shock and questions what he is seeing. He realizes that Ryun is an assassin who is used to fighting ratmen. He mutters that if they make it all the way there, this will be a problem. He steps onto a metal platform and moves toward a central chamber. A purple glow gathers at the center as he approaches it. He resolves that he will never hand it over. In the central chamber, purple energy rises from a book at the center, while the man stands before a glowing magic circle. He repeats that he will never hand it over, and declares that everything of Goma belongs to him. Someone appears at the entrance and tells him to stop. The newcomer reminds the man that he has not forgotten the condition for lending the book. He calmly tells him to continue his experiments as usual. Regarding the intruders, he tells him not to worry. The man hesitates and asks if that is really true. The newcomer explains that he knows how important he is to them and calls him the treasure of their territory. However, he warns that anything beyond reading and researching that book is not allowed. He adds that as long as the conditions are followed, they will ensure his safety. The man hesitates and says that the opponent is still dangerous. The other man dismisses it and calls the intruder nothing more than a marten bug. Meanwhile, Ryun examines a weapon and concludes that, no matter how he looks at it, the villagers could not have made something like this. He explains that ratmen reproduce at an incredible speed and can evolve to goblin level in about a month. After a year, ratman warriors at orc level are born. Ravina questions what that has to do with the weapons. Ryun concludes that the weapons are made far too well, and considering the dungeon's age and the Ratman's evolution speed, reaching this level should be impossible. He adds that it is not the mage's craftsmanship either. The weapons are too standardized to be the work of a mere village blacksmith. He realizes what it means. Using these Ratmen, someone has been building an army. Ravina points out that to use them as an army, they would need to evolve to warrior level, and this should take a year. But Goma created this dungeon only recently. Ryun concludes that there must be a way to create Ratmen without waiting for reproduction or evolution. He identifies it as the most basic and forbidden method. Kidnapped village men are being turned into Ratmen. Ravina trembles in shock. Ryun states that if his theory is correct, there are two people capable of doing this. Ryun then reveals the first name behind the scheme, Lord Kazan Khaled. He explains that the one actually carrying out the plan is the Lord's only brother and the commander of the Kailed Knights, Sir Caden Kolald. Looking at the scene around them, Ravina realizes the implication. An army made of Ratmen. Ryun adds that it is unlikely the villagers were involved. As he explains, Khaled's people are not wealthy. There is no way they could supply so many high-quality weapons and traps. He also says that it would be impossible for Goma to accomplish this alone. Therefore the Lord must be involved. The Lord has been using his own people as sacrifices. Ryun then urges Ravina to hurry, saying there might still be survivors. They prepare to move deeper into the dungeon. Ravina pauses for a moment and thinks. Then she says that he seems to know a lot about creating Ratmen, which makes Ryun visibly uneasy. Ryun awkwardly replies that it is complicated. Before he can explain further, his eyes suddenly widen. A loud crack echoes from back as a Ratman lunges from behind him with its jaws open. Ravina reacts instantly and strikes the creature, stopping the attack mid-air. Ryun realizes what just happened and notices the weapon, a crossbow. Ravina casually says she has had combat training too. Ryun studies the bolt lodged in the Ratman's body and notes that it struck right in the center, even in the dungeon's darkness. He mutters to himself about her combat training. As they continue walking, Ravina asks why the Lord would cooperate with Goma despite how inhumane it is. Ravina notices another trap on the ground as they move deeper. She explains that, if what Ryun said about Ratmen is true, then there is no better material for building an army than Ratmen. After thinking it through, he concludes that it is certain now. This is not something a normal assassin or an ordinary Drea citizen would come up with. He looks ahead and begins to say, "She." Before he can finish, Ravina interrupts and says they are almost at the dungeon's center. She senses the mana source that is powering the magic traps ahead. Ryun looks at the glowing energy flowing through the ground and agrees. It seems they are almost at their destination. Ryun and Ravina suddenly sense something and look forward. A heavy spiked weapon crashes onto the ground with a loud impact. A large figure appears from the darkness. It is a towering Ratman ogre holding the massive spiked weapon. Ravina recognizes the creature and identifies it as a Ratman ogre. Ryun casually notes that she seems to know quite a bit about Ratman too. She quickly tells him that this is not what matters right now. The Ratman ogre roars loudly and opens its mouth wide. The Ratman ogre swings the huge spiked weapon downward toward them. Ryun steps forward and raises his dagger to block the attack. Ravina shouts that no matter how skilled he is, he cannot block that weapon with a dagger. The weapon crashes down, but Ryun deflects the strike. The impact shatters part of the ground as the massive weapon rebounds upward. Ryun deflects the ogre's spiked weapon and forms a mana sword in his hand. Ravina is shocked and wonders how a 5th-rank assassin can use a mana sword. Ryun tells her that he will counterattack and asks if he can leave the support to her. She immediately agrees. Ravina fires several bolts from her crossbow. The bolts strike the Ratman ogre's body but fail to pierce its thick skin. Ryun tells her that she does not need to hit it directly and explains that a crossbow cannot pierce a Ratman ogre's skin. He tells her to find a way to use the traps around them. The system activates information search, then displays the enemy as Ratman ogre, level 20. Ryun notes that level 20 is about the same as the Manslayer. He clashes with the ogre's spiked weapon and knocks it aside. He thinks that if he used his necromancer power he could win easily, but it is still too early to use it here. The system activates physical acceleration, then activates physical domination. The system reports that the strength stat temporarily increases. The Ratman ogre roars and rushes forward. Ryun moves quickly and strikes at the monster, while the system reports that physical acceleration is enhanced. The system also reports that the agility stat greatly increases temporarily. Ryun judges that the most effective attack right now requires taking a risk. He accepts the danger and decides he has no choice but to do it. The system reports that the mana sword is enhanced. Energy gathers around the blades as the system reports that cutting power and attack power greatly increase. Ravina glances back as Ryun raises his glowing swords behind her. The ogre leaps toward them. Ryun jumps high above the monster. He plunges both mana swords downward toward the Ratman ogre. Ryun narrows his eyes as energy crackles around him. He descends and slashes down with both glowing mana swords, striking the Ratman ogre. The impact sends blood spraying as the monster's body jerks from the blow. Ravina watches as the force of the strike blasts Ryun backward through the air. She calls out to Leon. The wounded Ratman ogre growls in pain. The system reports that a curse is activated. Purple energy spreads across the monster's body as it reacts with a choking sound. The system reports that the curse of physical weakness is activated, followed by the curse of slow, and then the curse of skin defense reduction. Ryun urgently tells Ravina that now is the moment, and instructs her to release the trap disarm. A device on the wall opens, mechanisms trigger as the trap activates, sharp spikes burst outward and impale the Ratman ogre as it screams. Ryun dives down again and drives both glowing swords into the monster's body. He lands while looking down at the fallen Ratman ogre with a calm, confident expression. Watching the whole scenario, Ravina asks if they defeated it. Ryun stops her bait saying idiot and mentioning not to say things like that. Suddenly, Ravina warns Ryun to watch out. The newcomer, or say Sir Caden Khaled, attacks at Ryun from behind. Ryun notices the sudden schnage. He raises his weapon and counterattack. Caden Khaled stands with purple energy flickering around his body. Ryun grips his weapon as blue energy surges around him. They clash, striking at each other in close combat. Caden Khaled remarks that a mana sword at that age is impressive, then adds that he thought Ryun was a 5th rank assassin and questions if he is actually 4th rank. He then wonders if this brat is the one behind everything. Ryun remains focused. Ryun feels pain in his chest. The system reports that Arcan's curse is activating. Dark energy spreads through Ryun's body as the effect takes hold. Ryun pauses in confusion, then recognizes the black aura and questions if it is backlash from the mana he used while fighting the Ratman ogre, adding that he expected it but not the timing. The system reports that mana recovery slows down, then that health recovery slows down, and that wounds become more severe. Ryun gathers energy around himself and states that he needs to offset it somehow with the blue earth tempering method. He observes that thanks to his training, it is not as severe as before. Ryun stands with blood on his chest while Caden Khaled looks at him. Ryun considers that the problem is whether he can fight that man in his current state. He asks if knights ambush people these days and thinks that just by the way he holds his sword, he can tell he is a knight. Caden Khaled remarks that an ambush sounds unpleasant. He explains that it was merely a test to gauge Ryun's ability and that he held back enough so Ryun would not die. He adds that the fact Ryun's head is still attached after taking his attack as a sword expert proves it. Ryun looks at him sharply. Caden Khaled admits Goma underestimated Ryun, thinking he was just a 5th rank, but after seeing him fight the Ratman ogre, he became certain. Ryun charges forward with his blade, clashing against Caden Khaled's red energy. Caden Khaled states that Ryun is probably 4th rank or higher, and declares that, from now on, he will finish him with his full power. He identifies himself as the commander of the Khaled Knights, and states his name as Caden Khaled. Ryun recognizes that Caden is the Lord's younger brother, and remarks that an assassin would not be expected to introduce himself. Ravina identifies the signal from Ryun as one used by the Assassin Guild. By signaling, Ryun notes that, unlike the Ratman, Caden Khaled is a tricky opponent. Ryun tells Ravina to stay back so she does not get caught up in this. He adds that traps will not help against a sword expert, and urges her to hurry. Caden Khaled advances with his sword surrounded by red energy. Ravina looks shocked and speechless. Ryun steadies himself with his blade, facing Caden Khaled while Ravina runs. Caden Khaled asks that if Ryun is letting the woman escape first. He remarks that Ryun is quite the gentleman for an assassin, and Ryun adds that even if Caden Khaled does not reveal his name, it changes nothing. He declares that he is the type who accepts a challenge and rushes forward with blue energy. Ravina runs away as the clash erupts behind her. In her way, she finds a boy lying there and realizes the opponent is human. Meanwhile, Caden Khaled expresses that he does not mind a duel and swings his blade. Their weapons collide again with force. Caden Khaled declares that none of them will be leaving alive. Ryun grips his blade with blue energy and states that he will return those words. Ravina's scream echoes. He turns in shock. The boy stands with a distorted face, dark markings spreading across one side, while Ryun and questions whether it is human or a Ratman. Ryun realizes that Ravina is part of the Assassin Guild and notes how easily she was captured. Ravina stammers in denial. The man who now revealed himself as Goma steps from behind and states that her skill is not the issue. He explains that it is because of that Ratman's special trait. He continues that sometimes, among Ratmen created through failed experiments, rare ones gain special abilities. He explains that this one lacks combat power but has exceptional stealth and can switch between Ratman and human forms. He adds that when it is a Ratman, it follows his commands, but when it becomes human, some of its old memories seem to return. He concludes that it always tries to return to its mother somehow. He then remarks that, thanks to that trait, it was useful for kidnapping the village men. Goma recalls that he saw something among the mercenaries' belongings that it crawled toward, then ran out shouting its mother's name. He states that even though he controls its body, it still acted that way. He looks toward Ravina and declares that she is still human, regardless of being an assassin. He reveals that he used another human as a trap. Ryun questions why he is speaking so casually. He steps forward, blue energy surging around him, and says that as the assassination target, Goma has revealed himself. He adds that he could die thanking him for making his job easier. Goma bursts into loud laughter. Ryun repeats his question as he closes the distance. Goma's expression shifts in shock as Caden Khaled appears behind him. The boy restrains Ravina from behind, holding her as leverage. Caden Khaled asks if Ryun thinks he is in an advantageous position now. He tells Ryun not to worry about the woman and lunges downward with a strike. Ryun raises his blade and meets the attack, blue energy clashing against the descending blow. Caden Khaled declares that neither of them will leave alive as the impact sends fragments of energy scattering. He presses forward, stating that despite Ryun's bravado, his defense is weak. Ryun steadies his stance and counters. Goma notes that even with a mana sword, this level of power only amounts to a 4th rank from Martin. He shouts that they already knew he was coming. He explains that when the villagers made a request to Martin, Sir Caden added extra money to the advance payment. The goal was to lure in high-value targets to create higher-quality ratmen. Ryun states that kidnapping the villagers was not enough. He continues that they used the villagers' desperation to push them into hiring mercenaries. The Lord is cleared of all suspicion, while the village men and mercenaries are turned into ratmen. The villagers who lost husbands and sons are used and then blamed. Ryun grips his sword, anger visible, calling him a bastard. He asks what Caden Khaled thinks people are. Caden Khaled answers that they are resources. Ryun falls silent, then states he takes back what he said about a duel. He adds that, thanks to all the nonsense, he has bought time for his penalty to lessen. Caden Khaled remarks that he is still bluffing and questions if he really thinks he can win. Goma calls it ridiculous, and declares himself a sword expert and a third circle mage, adding that he still has many Ratman soldiers remaining. Ryun tells him to stop talking, and says that if he has something to show, now is the time. Energy surges around Ryun's body as his presence intensifies. Goma reacts in shock. Caden Khaled recognizes the creature from earlier. He identifies it as a Ratman ogre. Ryun raises his hand as a large skeletal undead form manifests behind him. He declares that from now on it is time for them to experience the pain of those who were slaughtered. The undead creature moves forward and releases a roar. Caden Khaled realizes it is undead and identifies Ryun as a necromancer. The undead charges while Ryun advances alongside it. The creature attacks with force, clashing against Caden Khaled. He counters, cutting through the assault while pushing forward. He states that even as an undead, a mere Ratman ogre is not enough to match him. Goma calls out to Sir Caden and orders him to capture Ryun alive. He explains that since Veda disappeared, necromancers have become extremely rare, and obtaining his knowledge would greatly advance their Ratman experiments. Ryun stands surrounded by multiple undead, while Caden Khaled laughs and calls it a valuable catch. Caden Khaled claims the undead was a trump card but was defeated too easily. Ryun questions whether this is the time to worry about others. He states that the one just defeated had already been tainted by his curse before becoming a zombie. Caden Khaled shows shock as the curse spreads across his body. Energy surges as the corruption takes hold, and he begins to lose control. He lets out a scream as the transformation worsens. Goma reacts in alarm, calling out to Sir Caden. Ryun observes calmly and asks how it feels to sink into darkness. Caden Khaled continues to distort under the curse. Ryun notices another presence and addresses someone nearby. Ryun brings up that Goma had mentioned having soldiers, while a monster's legs drag through the blood-covered ground. Sweat runs down on Goma's face, and a low growl escapes from the monster. Ryun continues by stating that both their soldiers will be used, a faint grin forming as his power gathers. Goma turns toward him in visible shock, as a large number of undead rise and gather around Ryun, forming a dense group in front of him with their glowing eyes fixed forward. Ryun then questions which side is stronger as Caden Khaled lets out a roar and rushes forward despite his unstable condition. He unleashes rapid attacks, striking repeatedly and cutting through the undeads as the continuous assault. Ryun acknowledges that his opponent is definitely stronger, then pauses and adds that it does not change the situation. Caden Khaled's face tightens as green energy surges through him, while Ryun continues that Caden Khaled has never fought a necromancer before. Caden Khaled is restrained by the creatures, as Ryun continues that as long as he remains human, there is a limit to his stamina. Blood splashes as the assault continues, and finally the kills Caden Khaled. Well, Goma recoils in fear, letting out a sharp cry as the situation worsens. The boy stands over a fallen ring, holding Ravina over his shoulder while the glowing ring lies on the ground. He focuses sharply on the ring, and then suddenly struggles, clutching his head as pain spreads across his face. Ravina brings up the ring, noting that it was a family heirloom. He continues that the mother handed it to mercenaries and made a request, then adds that she asked them to bring back her sons, even if only their bodies. The boy grits his teeth in anger. Goma declares that he has a hostage. He presses further, questioning whether Ryun even cares about what happens to his companion. Goma begins to threaten that if anyone touches him, something will happen, but before he can finish, a sharp strike pierces through him from behind. His body jolts, blood spraying forward as his grin freezes in place, and a broken sound escapes him. The attacker, the boy, stands behind him, hand soaked in blood, while Goma coughs and struggles, unable to react. The grip weakens, and his control slips away. He stares in disbelief, realizing something is wrong, insisting that it should not be possible because he had placed a spell that would make the boy destroy itself if it rejected its master. Nearby, Ravina watches with a steady gaze, her expression calm. The boy begins to speak, emitting golden light as energy surges outward. He quietly expresses gratitude, and the light intensifies. Goma's body convulses as electricity courses through him, his mouth opening wide in a scream. Flames erupt around him, lifting him off the ground as the blast expands. Moments later, his burning body crashes down, flames still consuming him. Ryun walks forward calmly as the fire continues to burn, leaving the scene in silence. He reaches down and picks up the fallen ring. The system notification appears, stating that the Quest Veda's legacy has been updated. Another message follows, indicating that a map containing the location of the hero's soul has been obtained. Ryun raises the ring and looks at it with focus. An arrow suddenly strikes his hand, knocking the ring away as it spins through the air behind him. Ravina steps forward and catches the ring. She places it on her finger, and a glow forms at her as its power activates. She acknowledges the result with satisfaction. Ryun turns toward her and calls her by name. Ravina faces forward, her expression sharpening as she prepares to act. Energy gathers and multiple glowing arrows are launched outward from her position. They pass by Ryun and rain down onto the horde, striking them repeatedly. The impacts spread across the crowd, overwhelming them as golden energy pours down and engulfs the area. Ravina explains that the weapon is imbued with divine power, and that any undead struck by it are annihilated, with the impact carrying over to the caster who raised them. Dark energy marks appear across Ryun's body as the effect takes hold. Ravina reveals that she had already known Ryun was a necromancer, and admits that Ryun was more impressive than expected. Ryun responds that he is surprised as well, his expression tightening as dark energy flickers around him. He remarks on Ravina's ability to change her personality at will, and even her mana, while holding a glowing crystal and channeling power. Ravina then states that it feels like they are competing to surprise each other, her body surrounded by bright flames as her confidence grows. She sets that aside and shifts her focus toward Ryun, directing her attention fully at him. Ryun stands with blue energy surrounding him as skeletal, undead figures loom behind him, and she questions whether Ryun is truly Veda's disciple. That's it for now. If you enjoyed the video, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more. Let me know your thoughts of this manhwa through comment section.